Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The hour is 7 o'clock, and as mayor, I hereby call to order the regularly scheduled Laconia City Council meeting for March 9th, 2015. And our first order of business, as always, is a salute to our American flag. Please rise and join Councilor Armin Bolduc in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilor Doyle.
Here.
Councilor Bounds.
Here.
Councilor Lippman.
Here.
Councilor Bear.
Present.
Councilor Hamel.
Here.
Councilor Baldwin.
Here.
Presiding Mayor Edward Ankler.
Present. Our first order of regular business, as always, is to look at minutes from previous meetings. And tonight we have before us the minutes of the regular meeting held on February 23rd, 2015. A motion would be in order to adopt those minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Councilor Bolduc makes that motion, seconded by Councilor Hamel. Any discussion of the minutes of February 23rd, 2015? All those in favor of adopting those minutes, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and those minutes are approved. Next up, we have a special presentation from the accounting firm of Melanson and Heath, and I believe we have Mr. McIntyre and Ms. Dupre, if I'm saying that correctly, with us tonight. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Thanks very much for the invitation to come in tonight. As the mayor said, Maggie Dupree was supervised the audit here for our firm here in Laconia. This year, I'm a new shareholder, not new to the firm, but new to the engagement here in Laconia. We did what it was referred to as a partner rotation, which occurs periodically, where we just change partners in charge of the engagement. And this year, we actually changed the entire audit team, sort of a fresh set of eyes, as a result of this June 30, 2013 audit, 14 audit. I don't know why, June 30, 2014. I'm going to give a quick overview of the financial statements, but to me, the most important communication that we can make to the council tonight is to let you know that our audit of your financial statements went very well. And what I mean by that is when we came in here in the fall, we found the books and records to be in good working order. Key balance sheet accounts were reconciled on a regular and timely basis, and it really facilitated the audit coming together with the conclusion as the compilation of this comprehensive annual financial report, which I know was in the council's packages. A couple of the things that audit standards require, a couple of additional things that audit standards require me to communicate to you is not just how the audit went, but that there were no disagreements between the city and our firm as to how to apply generally accepted accounting principles. And really the last mandatory thing that the standards require me to communicate is talking about estimates that may exist in your financial statements. And in our opinion, there's really only one significant estimate, and that is your OPEB, or OPEB, or your other post-employment benefit liability. But that estimate is actuarially determined, and so there's really some sound science behind coming up with that estimate. I'm going to walk through the financial statements very quickly. There are essentially they are what we refer to as dual perspective financial statements. What that means is there is both a long-term perspective set of financial statements and a short-term. In the long-term set of financial statements, anytime we go to cities and towns and talk about long-term perspective financial statements, the conversation is almost always dominated by OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefit, and by other, they're referring to benefits other than pension. So the OPEB is one of the key topics with long-term basis financial statements. The other is pension. And there'll be some changes to how you need to account for, not necessarily fund, but how you account for your pension liability effective June 30, 2015. When we look at that page in the financial statements, I'll speak a little bit more about that. But from a long-term perspective, the conversation is almost always about OPEB and the unfunded pension liability. On a short-term perspective, when we look at your general fund balance sheet, and with all the information that's in a comprehensive annual financial statement, most readers are still going to turn to your general fund, and they're going to look at your unassigned fund balance. And when they do that here in Laconia, they're going to see that key account balance increased almost $800,000 and represents about 10% of your operating budget. So from those are all positive things that can be taken from this comprehensive annual financial report. That said, if I could just
Can I
jump.
excuse you for just interrupt for a
Could you
second, Councilor
comment,
Lippman has
the
a-
10% is an important number. Could you give us a context of how that looks to the range of what you see in your audits?
Absolutely. We see all sorts of ranges. We see, I've even seen less than 1%, and I've also seen upwards of 20, 25%. 10% is probably a number that's probably the most widely viewed as between the GFOA, which is an organization called the Government Finance Officers Associations. That is one of their target recommendations, somewhere between 10, maybe a little bit north of there.
So we're not holding too much or too little.
You-
We're kind of like Goldilocks with respect to reserve.
That's a fine analogy. A city or town, just like any business, needs to have working capital. And essentially, that unassigned fund balance should be viewed as working capital. It's a snapshot of your financial position at one point in time, your fiscal year end. And of course, cash flow throughout the year is going to fluctuate. And really, that unassigned fund balance represents working capital is another way to look at it. So.
And for the sake of our audience, you may be getting to this. Excuse me if you are. I believe the unreserved fund balance as of June 30th was $5.2 million.
I am going to be getting to it. It's 5 point something.
So that's the number that Councilor Lippman is talking about.
Yes, it's your unassigned fund balance of just a little bit less than $5.6 million.
$6 million, sorry. Okay.
So, really, again, the highlights here, again, the dual perspective financial statements, long-term and short-term. I'm going to start going through some of the numbers on page 13, and while the council is looking at that, I'll just make a couple of notes of the pages leading up to page 13. The first would be beginning on page 1. It's our opinion on your financial statements. Everything else in this document belongs to the City of Laconia. In our opinion, it goes on for 3 pages, but it's really very straightforward. And it's that, in our opinion, your financial statements are totally in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for state and local governments. Following that, between pages 4 and 12 is management's discussion and analysis. It's a great resource to go back to at a later point in time to see some of the highlights and snapshots, some of which I'll be communicating here as we continue through the document. So, page 13 again is your long-term perspective balance sheet. The focus here will be on the first column of numbers. I just want to point out this is not your general fund. This is all of your non-enterprise fund activities put together in one column. And as I indicated earlier, so it's designed to look a little bit more like this balance sheet is designed to look a little bit more like a business's balance sheet, except that a couple of things that I mentioned earlier. There's the conversation is generally dominated by the unfunded liabilities of state and local governments these days, that being your OPEB liability, which you've incrementally been bringing that liability on in accordance with the accounting standards, and your unfunded pension liability. The city, like all governmental units here in the state of New Hampshire, are participating members in the New Hampshire retirement system. That system has an unfunded liability. And effective for June, in the current accounting requirement says as long as you're paying your annual assessment, that the city has no unfunded liability. Well, that standard has changed effective June 30, 2015, to where, and I'm going to simplify it, it's not quite this simple, but I think I can illustrate the effect here is, as a participating employer in the state system, you are, as a member, their unfunded liability, if you're 1 or 1.5% contributing member, then you are essentially, you need to record 1% of their overall unfunded liability, or maybe you're a 1.5% contributing member. And so whatever those mathematics work out to be, and the state's working on all those calculations right now, for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2015, you will need to put a liability on this balance sheet. And of course, as that liability goes up, The second number up from the bottom, your unrestricted net position, will of course go down. Again, I don't mean to, I guess I'm getting to all the bad news first, which when we talk about unfunded liabilities. This is not, we're going to get to the general fund, and there are some really positive things there. But in the course of going through the statements, this balance sheet is first, and that's why I typically talk about it first. So that when that unfunded liability comes on the books in June 30, 15, your unrestricted net position will decrease by essentially the same amount. So that's the long-term perspective, and those are subject matters that are dominated anytime state and local governments talk about their long-term perspective financial statements. The positive news really begins over on page 15. Page 15 is the city, and really the focus is on page 15, that first column of numbers, or your general fund, and it's the third number up from the bottom, or your unassigned fund balance, with an account balance as of June 30, 2014, of just a little bit less than $5.6 million. That third number up from the bottom, your unassigned fund balance, $5,574,412. It's your unassigned fund balance, or it used to be referred to as your unreserved fund balance. It's really just a terminology change that was implemented a couple of years ago. That key account balance of $5.6 million, it's increased over your prior year financial statements, June 30, 2013 financial statements. It's increased by almost $700,000, that key account balance. And not only did it increase in terms of dollars, it increased in terms of percentage. A lot of readers will not just look at that account balance of $5.6 million. They'll look in terms of what it is, how much in terms of a percentage is it of your general fund operating expenditures. And as we indicated earlier, it's just a little bit more than 10%, which really represents a good solid financial position for your general fund balance sheet. And communities need an unreserved fund balance, an unassigned fund balance, in order for it to have working capital throughout the fiscal year. Some of your other key fund balance accounts there, you have your assigned fund balance. Those are just some carry forwards of some appropriations. And your committed fund balance, this is the fifth number up from the bottom, your committed fund balance of $695,000. Those are by and large your capital reserve accounts, and those are also up over the prior year balance, which was about $460,000. So the two key numbers here, your committed fund balance and your unassigned fund balance, are both up. And if we want to look at the reasons why those two key account balances have increased, the best place to really look is over on page 19. Page 19 is the city's general fund budget and actual comparative schedule. And the focus here is on that last column of numbers on the right. At the top part of the page, you see your total revenues. And if you go to the first subtotal there, you see total revenues came in $349,000 more than you anticipated. This is about halfway down the page in the right-hand column. Total revenues of $349,000, and a lot of that is coming from motor vehicle permits and some solid waste revenues as well. In the middle part of the page, you see expenditures. This was really where a lot of positive results occurred in fiscal year 2014. In the middle part of the page, again focusing on that last column, the last column representing variance between the actual expenditures and what the final budget was, you can see the next subtotal down of $1,911,000. That $1.9 million represents unspent appropriations that were provided for in the budget process to the various departments that went unspent during fiscal year 2014. So the combination of those two things, 1.9 in unspent appropriations and almost $350,000 in positive revenue, or revenue greater than what you anticipated in terms of the budget, gave you very strong operating results of almost $2.3 million. But you do have to soften that, if you will, by the fact that the city used $830,000 of its fund balance and applied it towards the budget for fiscal year 2014. So by applying that prior fund balance, you were essentially anticipating that your outflows of dollars were going to exceed your inflows by this $835,000. So you can see that the performance was better than anticipated, even including the use of fund balance. by the number in the lower right-hand corner of $1.4 million. And it's that $1.4 million number that's driving the increase in those other two key accounts, in your unassigned fund balance and in your committed or your capital reserves. The math doesn't work out perfectly. There's a lot of reasons for that that are outlined in the footnotes to the financial statements. It's not my intention to walk through that tonight, but I can probably answer questions you may have on that. But that
So-
really
So 700,000 of the 1.4 million went into the
unassigned.
unassigned fund balance, and
Yes.
the rest went into reserve accounts?
Capital reserves were up about 250,000, I think it was. And the difference, because the math doesn't work out, really deals with the timing of certain expenditures and the fact that the carry forward of encumbrances is treated differently on the two pages. So that
So some examples of that would be that we carried forward, major carry forwards.
We carried forward some capital items. We had some items that we had committed to but not necessarily funded yet. So just because June 30th comes to an end, we've got some dollars that are committed to, and therefore, they'll carry forward into the next year and
And that
don't
would
show
be
on
in the
balance
capital
sheet.
outlay budget line here primarily?
Some of it capital, some of it's carry forward, some just could be ongoing expenditures that are split encumbrances over the years.
Could you give a couple concrete examples, just so that people know?
Sure, a couple of items that we've tried to save through our reserves. So when we did our master plan, we were saving in $20,000 increments to fund it. We're doing the same thing for our revaluation on our citywide assessment that typically is done every 5 to 7 years. There are times when we fund capital in the operating budget for street paving that doesn't necessarily all get completed by June 30th or paid by June 30th, but we certainly have projects in the queue that we've committed those funds for. So those would be a couple examples of items that, and we bring those kind of carry forwards to the council every year before we close out the fiscal year, and the council takes action on those.
The Main Street Bridge be one of those?
Main Street Bridge, we've had some expenditures, and we didn't issue the bond until we're getting ready to go right now. So in some cases, we put some capital into the budget, and depending how the project ends up in the queue, it may get issued in one fiscal year, it may not get issued to the next fiscal year, which then determines whether or not you just got a partial interest payment in 1 year, or you actually have an interest and principal payment. So all those things kind of vary, but the key items are all brought to council attention either through the budget or through the end of the year when we get ready to close out the fiscal year.
The balance of the CAFR and predominantly the basic financial statements include a number of footnotes on cash disclosures. Footnote that often gets a lot of attention is on communities' long-term debt. The key thing that I guess I would point out to there is that there is a rather rapid pay down of the bonds payable that is outstanding. I often am asked whether or not the amount of outstanding debt is, how that compares to with other communities. A lot of times, rating agencies don't so much look at how much debt is outstanding, but they look at how rapidly it's being paid out. And if you were to look if you choose to, and look in the body of the financial statements over on page 42, you can see that, you're paying almost 70% of your governmental debt off within a 10-year period. This is on page 42. There's two schedules there at the top of page 42. The first one is the governmental debt, and then you see the business type debt. That is your enterprise fund debt. At the top of the page 42, if you look underneath the row that is the pay down of your debt from fiscal year 2020 to 2024, everything above that indicates that you're paying off nearly 70% of your long-term debt within a 10-year period. That's higher than what I typically see. In the business type debt, if you were to run the same mathematics, you would see that there are, 64% of the long-term debt is being paid. That's probably a little bit more of average right there. But in general, I would look at that as more of a rapid payout than what we typically see. There's also some footnotes on the current OPEB liability. I talked a little bit about that in here, as well as some required supplementary information on that as well. So.
Councilor Lippman, question?
On the borrowing side of things, on page 66 of the report, which is, I know not the audited figures, but the percent of legal debt limit being used by the city and the schools. Can you give some context of in light of the statements you previously made, how that looks to you?
This is 66 or 60?
66.
Yep.
Yeah, we're using 15.9% of the legal debt limit for the
For the
city
city
and 20.5% for the...
Yeah.
How's that compare to what you see?
I would say favorable, meaning it's probably using less of the available debt capacity that you have available to the city here in Laconia than in others. But I do a lot of these meetings, and
Some debt is good.
so absolutely, the rating agencies will definitely tell you that. If they don't see enough debt there, they'll wonder if you're investing in, replacing your assets as they depreciate. But in terms of your original question, I'm a little hesitant to compare those numbers, only because while I do a lot of these meetings, that's not one that I can really speak to off standing here without doing a little bit more homework. I would be taking too much of a guess if I was trying to answer that. I can certainly have something I can look into and provide the finance director with an answer.
So for the sake of our audience, the numbers being referred to here are the state sets legal limits as to the borrowing power of municipalities and school districts, and at current, the city has borrowed in the equivalent of 16% of its total potential for borrowing, and the school district 21%, rounded off,
Yeah.
is what we're talking about.
Yes. Yep.
And then,
Further question?
just comment on page 67, the outstanding debt as a percentage of our applicable amounts with the county can be seen on that page.
So just in summary, again, as I indicated earlier, our audit of your financial statements went well for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Again, I always start with the long-term perspective financial statements, only because we think it's most important that the governing body and in the audience and really as a whole understand that there are unfunded liabilities out there, and some of the accounting treatment of those is changing going forward. But if you look at your general fund, which really doesn't incorporate those unfunded liabilities, you see increases in those two key account balances, the unassigned fund balance and the committed fund balance. We did make a couple of recommendations. We have made a couple of recommendations to the city in terms of improving some departmental receipt policies and procedures, as well as perhaps increasing or making a more robust policy with respect to student activity funds, and taking a look. It should be done periodically in terms of access to various ledgers. That's something that should be looked at least annually, and probably maybe even a little bit more, as to exactly who has access to what modules, and make sure that the segregation of duties remains appropriate given things that can happen, such as turnover and changes in actual positions. And we hope to sit down, and I think we will sit down with the finance director in the coming weeks just to go over the 2015 upcoming engagement, and find even ways to enhance the city's ability to pull together this CAFR even a little more quickly. So that's a very, very quick walkthrough of our audit and of your financial statements. But
Okay, any more questions for Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of items. And first, I know Scott brought this up. While Melanson Heath is not newer to the city doing the audit, we did go out to bid last year. We did continue. We thought this was the most advantageous bid, but one of our requests in going forward was that they change up their team to coming to do it, because we also wanted that fresh set of eyes to come in. Just sometimes you see the same people after a couple of years. It's a little bit familiar, and not saying we didn't get the same, quality of work, but it was good to shake it up and get some different people. So even though, again, the same firm, The team that was on it picked up a couple of different things that they noticed from being a fresh set of eyes. So we view that as being very positive and feel that we have a good working relationship. For those folks at home or here, this document is posted online. It was also linked to the agenda when we put all our background material, and it was linked through the newsletter as well. So anybody who wants to see it, we also can do it electronically. We also have hard copies at the library and in the city clerk's office, and we've got them available here in City Hall as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all our department heads, because as you see with the numbers here, it's definitely across all departments of what gets managed well during the year. They make adjustments, whether it's through unforeseen capital expenditures, through winter storms, through spikes in overtime due to items out of their control or whatever it might be. And certainly want to recognize our finance director, Donna Woodeman, and her team. Raquel McCutcheon, our assistant finance director, is here in the audience tonight and certainly plays a big role, but all our city staff. So I want to make sure we recognize them tonight as well. So.
Okay, we thank you both for coming tonight, and especially we thank you for your assistance, and thank you as well.
Thank you.
You
Good
bet.
evening.
Councilor Lippman?
I'd also like to ask if we could, subsequent meeting, have Donna and yourself spend a little time on the statistics and things that you compiled, 'cause I think there's some interesting things to bring to the council and the public's attention as well.
Absolutely. Maybe we schedule that for one of the meetings in April before we get into the budget full-blown.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have to deal with a couple of items on our consent and action calendar. For the sake of our audience, these are items that do not generally require discussion or debate because we have looked at them before, and so can dispatch with these fairly quickly. The first item on our consent and action calendar tonight is a request from the Greater Lakes Child Advocacy Center for the use of O-Pee-Chee Park on Saturday, August 1st, 2015, from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. for a fundraiser. Motion would be in order to approve this request.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Doyle. Any discussion of this request from the Greater Lakes Child Advocacy Center? That's a mouthful. All those in favor of adopting this request, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, that's adopted. The second one on the consent and action calendar tonight is from the Stinson Dowling Scholarship Fund, and that is to use the Smith Track Fields and Bleachers at O-Pee-Chee Park for a fundraiser for Cystic Fibrosis Foundation on Sunday, June 28th, 2015, from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. 12 p.m. Is that literally 12 a.m.?
4 hours. Yeah.
It is? They're going to be there until midnight? Maybe we should look at the fine print on that one.
I don't think that's right, because
Yeah,
park
yeah.
closes at 10.
I doubt that's correct.
We think it's probably till noon time, yes, I think it's, so we can fix
We'll
that
say that's-
administratively.
We'll say that's 12 p.m. and can revisit that if that turns out not to be the case.
Could the manager get a hold of Kevin and find out about that?
It says it, but I believe it's just based on the type of event and whatever. I'm pretty confident it's the few hours that run around noontime. If it's something different, we'll bring it back to your attention.
Okay.
Would that be the way to
So
handle
the
it?
motion is 9
Yep.
a.m. to 12 p.m. then, okay? So the motion is in order. Counselor Bolduc makes the motion, seconded by Counselor Bolduc. All those in favor of adopting this request from the Stinson Dowling Scholarship Fund, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, and the motion is adopted. One of those yes votes was a tad bit slow.
No, well, he was laughing at the fact that he
I made the
made
motion
the
and
motion
seconded
and
it.
seconded
Oh,
it.
did I say Counselor? The second was made by Counselor Hamel, I'm sorry.
We know that.
Okay, next up is citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. And this is the portion of our meeting where we invite comment from the audience for any item that is not anywhere on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who would like to address the council on some matter that is not at all on tonight's agenda? See anybody moving, so we'll move on to interviews. We have a number of interviews to conduct tonight. Tradition on these interviews is to review the procedure for the applicants who are with us tonight, is the council does interviews on one night and makes appointments at the following meeting. So first up, we have the Library Board of Trustees. We have 2 regular positions and 1 alternate position with terms expiring. We have 2 applicants tonight. Both are incumbents, current members of the Library Board of Trustees. And as I call your name, if you could just come forward and identify yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you would like to be reappointed. And first up is Kimberly Danasy. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Denosi, and I'm just nearing the completion of my first 3-year term on the Library Board of Trustees. It's been a very gratifying, positive experience. I work with a terrific group of people. They're very dedicated, capable, not only the staff and the library director, but also my fellow trustees. When I first came before you 3 years ago, and I give you a little bit of my background, I had been a library volunteer for many years. This was my first opportunity to actually serve on a library board of trustees. I very much appreciate the opportunity to serve another 3-year term. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, Ms. Danasy?
I just want to say thank you very much for serving and coming
Thank
forward.
you. As I said, it's been a very positive experience. We're very fortunate in this city to have an institution like the Laconia Public Library. I hope you all have library cards. I hope you all receive our monthly newsletter, and I hope you all take advantage of the wonderful institution right down the street. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Next up is James O. Ole Anderson. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I am Ole Anderson. I've been resident of Laconia since '72 era, somewhere around there. Been in the library board for about 10 years now, I think, somewhere around there. I like volunteering for the city. It's an obligation I feel that we all have in one way or the other. And I'd like to serve another 3 years if you guys want me to.
Question from Counselor Bear.
Hi, Ole.
Hi.
What ward are you in? You haven't listed your address or
I hate
ward.
to admit this, but I got moved, so I'm not sure what the ward number is. I think it's
Probably
Henry's,
yeah.
Ward's 3.
Ward
I go
3?
at the middle school now.
Oh,
Across the
okay.
street from me
Ward
is Ward
Okay.
1. I got moved last time.
We're happy to have you all.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange because some of the school board member from Ward 1 is across the street from me, but that's okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Anderson?
By the way, I think we do have Goldilocks as well as the budget, so we have a little bit of everything at the library, so come on over.
Thank you, Ole.
Thank you for serving.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Okay, next up is Parks and Recreation Commission. As I understand it, George Hawkins and David Pluter are retiring from the Parks and Recreation Commission, and we have 2 new applicants, and only 2. And the first is Deanna Geyer. Welcome, Mrs. Geyer.
I am Deanna.
President of youth soccer for 19 years?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yep, I just retired last year. I moved here in '89, started coaching in 1990, have been coaching ever since. I coach soccer, I'm still coaching 2 teams. I coached in the basketball league and Little League. The youth is very important to me. I started coaching before I had my son. My son just turned 16 and got his license today. So we've been in the fields and all over the city playing. Soccer went from starting at about 100 kids. This past fall, we had 525 kids. So the parks are very important to us. I'm very committed to our youth and love using the parks. They're great. They've done a great job. Robbie Mills is right down the road from my house. and we use it all the time. It's wonderful. Yes.
Any questions for Mrs. Guyer?
You're busy.
I am.
Well, we-
I am.
I think we all would say that we very much appreciate your stepping forward to volunteer for this position.
Thank you.
Counselor Hamel.
It's really not a question, but I know Skyer will do a fantastic job. I've heard of her and what she's done for the sports leagues, and I think she'll do a great job over there.
Thank you very much.
That's for sure.
Thank you very
Super.
much.
Thank you.
Well, I need help with this next name. Guy Peterzani?
Close enough.
How, did I come close?
Petazzani.
Pettazzani, okay.
That's okay. I was in
Peterzani,
third
Guy.
grade before I was able to
Well,
pronounce it.
Guy, welcome.
This guy is good.
I'm also known as Tony.
Tony.
Yeah.
I've been involved with baseball, soccer, basketball, and heavily into lacrosse. I started with the lacrosse league up here, and we are growing, and right now, I've sort of shied off and no longer coaching and stuff, though I am the JV coach for the girls' team at the high school. The main reason why I want to do this is the Park and Rec Commission has been great to me when I wanted something from them, and it's just an opportunity to give back. I think the city has some great fields and facilities, and I like to keep them that way and make sure that they're properly utilized.
Any questions for Tony?
Good job.
Again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for stepping forward. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to trustee of the trust funds, one regular position, John Nivas. Mr. Nivas came before us just last year to fill out a term, the resignation of
Dick Breton.
Dick Breton, that's right. And
That's
so
right.
now he's here tonight seeking a new three-year term.
Right, yeah. I previously had served for 6 years before that, so
Yep.
I've had that. And in my banking career, I spent 35 years in trust investments with various banks in New England and the Midwest, including administering net town trust funds, so, you know, I'm seeking reappointment for a 3-year term. Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Nivas? Counselor Hamel.
Just a question. Are the trustees actively looking for new investments or changing the investments and that, so that the city can make the most of the market? Or
We have not discussed that yet. One of the things I was waiting to see whether I was going to get reappointed or not. But we've had the same investment manager.
Yeah.
In fact, I was the account officer when that was at First Central Bank. So that's how long we've been with the same investment manager. Not the same people, but the same company. You know, it's one of the things that part of due diligence, you should periodically just go out and look to make sure, you know, that you have the best thing. And that's one of the things I think we'll tackle over the next year.
do you have, does the trustees have input on what investments you can make, or is it all done by the
It's-
person that's in charge,
It's done by the investment manager.
by the investment manager?
We do not recommend to them specific things. We've hired them for their investment expertise. Trustees set investment policy, asset ratios, things like that, but the individual investments are done by the manager. And we have an investment policy that specifies what they can buy and what they can't buy.
And they report to you every year on
Every
what
quarter.
you're making or losing?
Every quarter.
Yeah, okay.
Well, actually, we get monthly statements from
Yep,
them, but then they do a visit here at City Hall. It's usually the third Monday of January, April, July, and November, October, rather, which is the month after the end of the quarter.
Okay. So if something comes across, one of the investments is tanking or whatever, can you make a suggestion?
Oh, yeah,
that-
yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I have done that previously.
Okay.
You know, I have called them and asked specifically what their thinking was on it.
Okay. Very good.
Question from Counselor Lippman.
On the investment policy, John, when's the last time that's been updated or reconsidered by the,
Well, it was adopted in '07. I know it was looked at, you know, a couple of years later, and that's one of the things we're going to do again now, you know, to look at that and, you know, fairly broad language, Henry.
In terms of asset allocation to equities versus bonds?
About
and-
60% equities, and the balance either in bonds or cash.
That's pretty,
It's been moved down a little bit from where it was probably 3 years ago when we were up into the 70% range.
yes.
So we've, yeah.
And in terms of the change in policy with respect to being able to take some of the appreciation for, that's the Putnam Fund, though,
Putnam
right?
Fund, yeah.
As opposed to these funds, right?
Any other questions? Counselor Hamel?
Do they automatically rebalance it? In other words, if you have a stock, particular stock that goes through the roof, do they automatically rebalance so that your
I don't know what-
exposure?
I don't know what you mean by automatically. They review
Well,
that,
yeah.
and they may scale it back, because one of the
That's
things
what I
is
meant.
that we don't want an individual position to be more than 5% of the total portfolio, so they will, scale back.
Yep,
But,
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, they look at it, they're looking at it daily, as part of their process in managing the portfolios that they manage.
And who is doing that now?
Citizens Bank.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, John.
If I could,
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, just, no, the meetings are public meetings. They're open, they're held downstairs, they're posted, the information is available. I don't think we have the trust accounts online, but there's certainly, those documents are available for anybody in the public wanting to come in and see them or attend any of the meetings.
Who is chairman now? Is it Carl
Carl
Wright?
Wright is still chairman, yeah.
Okay, thank you, John.
very much.
Thank you for serving.
Planning Board, we have several alternate positions vacant on the Planning Board. We have one applicant for an alternate position for 3 years, Michael Della Vecchia. Mr. Della Vecchia here this evening. I think I know everybody in the room, and I don't know any I don't see anybody, so I guess we need to follow up and
We'll follow up and see if we can arrange to have them here for the
see
next
what the
meeting.
status of that is.
So this is a new position, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
This is a new position.
3 vacant alternates.
No, it's,
He's new.
applying for, he's new, yes. He's applying for an alternate position, yes. Putnam Fund, Jim Regato, I see in our audience. Mr. Regato is seeking reappointment to a 5-year term on the Putnam Fund Board.
Correct. I filled out the term of Robert Holdbrook. Now I'm up for reappointment. Some of the things that we've been able to accomplish in the past few years is I've been able to and establish a good contact with booking of different events, new contact for the fund, new sound and light operators, and a company to come in, and we're doing this for the first time. We're actually booked out now a full year, and now looking at ahead 2016. Our programs, what we're trying to do is diversify things. We always try to get a program into the schools. Right now, we have Larry Freitz, which we've contracted with. He's going to each of the schools and is tailoring a program with the principals of each of the schools. He's done the high school and gotten rave reviews for it. We bring in speakers. We had John Rizzo, the chief counsel for the CIA for 30 years, come in and talk. So we try to get lectures, as we do also concerts and different types of concerts. In Thanksgiving, we try to bring in a blues concert. We are going to be having John McDermott, one of the founding members of the Irish Tenors. So we're really trying to mix things up, have lots of different types of entertainment and programs for the citizens of Laconia and free of charge. And I'd like to continue doing that.
Any questions for Mr. Regato?
Just a comment.
Thank
A
you.
comment?
For what it's worth, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
We appreciate your willingness to continue to serve. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our interviews tonight. Next up is a public hearing. We have a public hearing scheduled tonight for the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 235 zoning relative to alternative treatment center medical marijuana dispensaries. Notice of this public hearing was made in the Wednesday, February 25th, 2015 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun. That notice was also posted at City Hall, the Gale Memorial Library, and the offices of the Laconia School District and the Laconia Community Center. So what we have tonight before us again is the proposal that came to us with the recommendation of the planning board that we adopt a new portion of our zoning ordinance to restrict, I'm summarizing very briefly here, to restrict any and all alternative treatment centers, medical marijuana dispensaries, and/or growing operations to specific zones within the city, specifically the industrial zones of the city, as opposed to commercial zones or residential zones. And so we're scheduled to take a vote on this ordinance tonight, so if anyone would like to address the council on this matter, for or against, now is the time to speak. Don't see anybody moving, so I will close the public hearing at 7:45 PM, and we'll take this up again under old business. Next up is the mayor's report. A couple of items I'd like to cover tonight. You may recall that last fall, we helped celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of what is now Avid Thermalloy Corporation, which is headquartered here in Laconia, a worldwide corporation with facilities on several continents, including Europe and a couple parts of Asia, India, China. And we're proud to that they have moved back home last year and call Laconia as their corporate headquarters now. And as a part of that celebration of their 50th anniversary, the company donated $10,000 to worthy local causes, and the president of the company, Mr. Alan Wong, matched that contribution with another $10,000 and entrusted that money to me and in the name of the city, and asked us to determine where that money should be donated to. And with the advice and counsel of a number of people around the city that I spoke to on this issue, getting some good advice, I'm going to announce tonight how that money is going to be distributed. And it's going to be distributed in equal parts to 4 different local organizations. And they include the Boys and Girls Club of the Lakes Region. We'll get a $5,000 donation. The Greater Lakes Child Advocacy Center, which I stumbled over earlier in the meeting saying that name, will get another $5,000. For those of you who are not familiar with that organization, it's an organization that was founded under the auspices of the Attorney General's office perhaps 10, 12 years ago for the purposes of providing a center where children who have been allegedly been abused may be interviewed and protected in a safe environment during the criminal justice system process. And all of the sheriff's office and all of the local police departments in Belknap County use that facility to deal with children when they become involved in situations like that. Very worthy cause, and one that's been habitually underfunded. And I think this will come in will be very much well appreciated. Thirdly, $5,000 will go to the Belknap Mill Society. I thought this was an easy call, given Avid in advanced technology represents the future of industrial employment and industrial endeavor in the city of Laconia, that a bow should be made to our history as well. And they greeted that news with great enthusiasm, and I think they're going to become significantly involved in trying to help the Belknap Mill going forward, because they see the logic there of the bridge between what they're doing now and our history as a center of industry here in Laconia. And lastly, money will also be donated to the new Immigration Integration Initiative that has been established under the auspices of the Lakes Region Public Partnership for Public Health. And this is a new operation that's been set up in 4 cities in the state of New Hampshire under funding primarily from the New Hampshire Endowment for Health and the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation are funding the first 3 years of the endeavors in Nashua, Manchester, Concord, and Laconia. And in Laconia, our endeavor here has already hired a first employee, and Kate Brushakova, who is a foreign-born young lady, very capable. She was born in Slovakia. And actually, interestingly, I hope you all, if you don't know her, I hope you come to we'll have her one night here. Very interesting story, because she came to the United States first as, I think, in the late 90s, as an employee on the housekeeping crew at the Margate Resort. You know, we're all familiar. In the summer, they bring people in from other countries and whatnot, and she liked it so much here that she stayed or came back and got her education here and whatnot, and fascinating young woman, and hope you all get to know her. So she's going to be coordinating this program, and the purpose of the program is simply to try to recognize that we have a substantial population in our city of people who are foreign-born, and to do what we can to develop programs and activities and whatnot to try to integrate those people more thoroughly into the everyday aspects of life here in Laconia. And Councilor Lippman is certainly familiar with that, because we have any number of foreign-born medical providers who work for LRG Healthcare. And I thought this was entirely appropriate for Avid, because they have any number of foreign-born employees working for them that we all had the pleasure of meeting a number of them on the night of their 50th anniversary, including the president of their company and their chief engineer, who is a native of India. And they bring into our community employees, especially in the engineering front, from all over the world who are working in and out of Laconia. So I thought that that was a particularly applicable use of their money to donate. The grants that this new organization got from those two entities I mentioned earlier had a prerequisite attached to them that they needed to secure some local funding of their own in addition to the grant funding. So this is in effect part of a match to secure that grant funding for that organization. So I'm happy to make those announcements tonight, and we'll in the coming weeks, we'll get that money to those 4 organizations, and I'm sure it will be greatly appreciated. The other thing I wanted to mention real quickly is I mentioned at our last meeting that we have a vacancy on the Lakes Business Park Board because of the resignation of Councilor Bear. Councilor Lippman and I, at least for the time being, continue to serve on that board. And I didn't hear at the last meeting anybody volunteering as far as other councilors to serve on that board. So unless there is an objection, the city manager and I are going to reach out to the community in general to solicit. There's no requirement that the members of that board be members of city council representing Laconia. We need 3 in total. And so we're going to reach out to the community. Based on our last meeting, I've already had 2 people step forward and volunteer to serve on that board. So perhaps we'll even get a greater pool by doing a little advertising for that position as well. So we'll do that. Okay, next up is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. This is the place in the agenda for the public to speak to the council on any item that is on tonight's agenda in any place on tonight's agenda. One that we've already covered or one still to come up. And I see former Mayor Rod Dyer at the microphone.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. I'm appearing on behalf of Erica Blizzard, and I'm not here to go over the items that I personally and previously have mentioned to you. My purpose in rising is simply to suggest to you a pathway based on what we heard earlier at the work session. And what we propose is that there be an extension of the current lease. We think that's the most appropriate thing to do at the present time, that it provides flexibility as far as the city is concerned, that it's a fair disposition as far as the city is concerned. Now, I heard earlier the fact that the current lease could not be extended, and I disagree with that interpretation. I've do a lot of leases. I've done dozens and hundreds of leases over the years. If you have willing parties, number one, the lease is still in existence. If you have willing parties, the lessor and the lessee, then there's no reason, in my opinion, based on my experience, that the current lease could not be amended or extended by mutual agreement. And what we propose is that the lease, in fact, be extended, that the terms be negotiated with the city manager if you determine that the city manager should be the authorized person, that the lease payments be based on currently commercially available values, and that it be extended to within a period of time that the council feels is reasonable. I think that would eliminate a number of questions. Actually, it would take this out of Chapter 183, and there is, in my judgment, nothing to prevent the city from amending and/or extending the current lease. And I would just simply point out that based on the evidence that's been presented and the comments presented to the city council, I don't believe there's any current public need for the property. You've already declared that it's not necessary for city purposes. You do have the authority to enter into a lease, and obviously, the present lease has never been challenged. No claim has ever been made that it was invalid or that the city council did not have the authority to enter into the lease in 1985. You would continue to receive the rents, you'd continue to receive the taxes, and you'd retain the flexibility for future uses. So in fairness to the Blizzard family and recognizing the contributions that they've made over the years as far as their business is concerned, also the financial contributions that they've made with regard to the taxes and the rent that they've paid, and also taking into consideration the future payments that they would make, we believe that it would be fair for the council to authorize the city manager to sit down and negotiate an amendment and an extension of the current lease. I have looked at the lease. There's no provision in here that I haven't seen or recognized in dozens or hundreds of leases. And as I indicated at the outset, I have personally been involved in innumerable extensions and amendments of leases. So I see absolutely no reason why this particular lease could not be extended. So just wanted to very briefly present this.
Before you leave, Councilor Lippman has a question.
Yeah.
Great, we respect your background, Rod, and though I know you're representing the Blizzards, what would be the counter arguments that we've likely heard that would lead to a different view of that situation, and why would you see it? And you see it differently, but why?
I don't think so, in all honesty, Councilor. Now, I know there's been a lot of stirring around as far as Chapter 183 is concerned, and that relates only to the sale of city-owned property. And there's a distinction between the sale of city-owned property if the property has been acquired through a tax sale. And under those circumstances, the only possible way that the property could be sold would be by means of a sealed bid procedure. But there's also Section 8 of 183, which specifically states that if the property is acquired by the city in a manner other than by tax deeds, then a different procedure is called for. And then you say, well, okay, how do you reconcile the one provision in the ordinance that says all city land has to be sold by sealed bid, with the other section in 8 that says that the city council may have private and direct negotiations with purchasers. And there's a basic principle that most lawyers understand, and that is if there's a general provision and then there's a specific provision in an ordinance or a statute, the specific provision will control the general one. So in order to realistically look at the two provisions and reconcile them, you have to say what would be the reasonable outcome. The reasonable outcome is that if there's city land that has been acquired other than by tax deeds, then the city council has full power to negotiate the sale of that property in any manner that it sees fit. So, once again, while that's relevant to the sale of property, that would not be, those provisions would not be relevant to the lease of the property. So, if it was good in 1985 and 30 years later, then we believe that it's appropriate at the present time. That gives you the flexibility of looking at future uses of the properties surrounding the Lakeport Landing property, and we just think that's a fair outcome of the process. So, thought it was worthwhile for me to...
Follow-up question?
In terms of an original approach, it followed your reasoning on that.
Yeah.
Why not have done that approach to start with?
Well, we could have, in all candor, and if I had known, but I'm not smart enough to have figured the end game, to be perfectly honest. And I did not realize that there would be, when I read the ordinance, I felt that it was clear in my mind, and I checked with a couple of my partners, it was clear to us that Section 8 of the ordinance controlled. However, it's my later understanding that you've received an opinion to the contrary. I have to live with that. And looking at where things stand at the present time, taking into consideration the fact that there are other people interested in that property for their own commercial reasons, we looked at it from the standpoint of what's practical, what's reasonable as far as the Erica Blizzard is concerned, Lakeport Landing, the tradition that they have, the fact that they've invested all this money into the property. We just feel that fairness would indicate that that the best outcome, as I see it, would be an extension of the lease. And I think that's a fair outcome as far as the community is concerned.
Counselor Hamel?
Ron, so in your opinion then, as far as the sale versus the lease, so you're saying that the lease process would not have to be a bid process?
That's my personal belief. Obviously, you'll review that with your own counsel. But based on my experience, and I just sat down and read this lease word for word to see if there was anything in there that would counter what I believe is the current state of the law and the practice as far as amendment of leases are concerned. So there's no question that it terminates in 2015. But my point is there's no reason why the city council, acting as the lessor, cannot agree to an extension of the terms or negotiate additional terms and amendments of the lease. I do it routinely, have been doing it for 40 years.
So at the end, so if you've had a lease where it's been reapplied for so many years and then it ends up ending, if you had those where you could just turn around and do another lease?
You could enter into a new lease, and you would do so if this present lease had terminated. But it isn't. It's still in effect. So that's why it's relevant and appropriate to simply amend the current lease, extend it, and I mean, I just have done so many of them that I just can't really imagine that there would be any legal question as far as the ability of the city to undertake this.
You haven't mentioned a term. What are you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but are you talking literally a short-term fix like 1 year, or are you talking 20 years? Or
Our recommendation would be 10 years, but that's subject to negotiation, because this would be a negotiated
But your
lease.
first number would be 10 years.
Well, my first number would, of course, be 10 years.
Thank you. Any other questions? Counselor Bounds?
Yeah. I guess I'm a little confused, and I know you understand that we need clarification as to whether this lease can in fact be negotiated or amended, or whether it has to be a new lease, which I think is what Councilor Littman was talking about. Are you withdrawing your offer with respect to the purchase of the property and submitting a new offer, or you're going on two tracks here? Do you know?
I don't know, Erica? Well, ideally, if this, in our world, we'd like to buy the property. But I am also aware of the fact that there are other interests involved. There's already been litigation in the history of this property. So, and I know that there's going to be an issue raised with regard under 183 as to what portion of the ordinance would actually apply. So that, in my opinion, that would involve an automatic appeal. I'm trying to be pragmatic. I'm saying what is best for my client, and what is a fair outcome as far as the city is concerned.
Well, let me put the question a little differently. You would agree with me that a competitive bidding process for the property may be in the city's best interest in terms of highest price and best use and those kinds of issues.
No.
Let me finish. Notwithstanding and understanding that they've been there since 1985, and they've made very valuable contributions to the community during that entire time frame, and that has to be part of the consideration of how we go forward and what it is we do. I'm done now.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess, in my mind, the issue of fairness comes into play. And I think that in view of the history of the property and the fact that the Blizzard family has dealt fairly with the city over these years, has never missed a payment as far as taxes or the lease payments are concerned, has also made other contributions. For example, Paul Blizzard paid for the drawbridge that was put into place a few years ago, and that was strictly his to pay for. The Blizzard family still pays for the crossing signals and the electricity and all the signals that the Hobo Railroad uses in that area. So I think it's just a matter of fair play.
Well, when you say it's a matter of fair play, I understand your position, but this lease was negotiated straight up in 1985. Everybody knew what it said.
Yeah.
These were the negotiations. This was the deal. This was when it would expire. It's not like that was a hidden part of the negotiations. It was straight right on the table. It's what you negotiated for.
I agree. I can't disagree with that, and it is what it is. But it doesn't need to be, what my point is, it doesn't need to be the immutable outcome.
I understand what you're saying. I do. And I am very mindful of the contributions that have been made by this family over the course of the entire time that they've occupied those premises. I'm not ignoring that at all.
Any other questions for Attorney Dar? Okay, does anyone else wish to address the council tonight on this or any other issue that is somewhere on tonight's agenda? Mr. Wright.
If you want.
Could you identify yourself for the record for us, please?
Yes. Bruce Wright from Irwin Marine. I didn't come with benefit of counsel this evening because I didn't think it was going to take a turn to one side as relates to the matter of the property there. So just briefly, though, the matters that I would like to comment on are that this is a lease that involves the public sector. It's not a lease that involves two private parties who can choose to only negotiate amongst themselves. I think you're in a different arena here. It's property owned by the city of Laconia, and I think you have a different standard and level to which you need to function for the entire population of the city when you're dealing with this matter. Certainly, we are directly next door. Some of the issues you've addressed could even go away if the property were owned by a direct abutter. But that's not really what I want to talk about. Again, we're looking just to have a fair and open process that anyone who is interested in participating in as it relates to this party has the opportunity to do. And I think that would be the right and proper thing to have take place in 2015, and it's not what originally took place 30 years ago. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else like to address the council tonight on this or any other matter? Okay, we'll move on to committee reports. I understand we have some committee business tonight. I'm sorry, Councilor Lippman.
Where do we go from here with this?
This is under old business on our
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Okay, we have I understand we have a request to schedule a meeting for March 23rd following the regular council meeting. Did you request this, Councilor Barrow?
No way.
Following the regular council meeting on March 23rd regarding, this is a meeting of the Finance Committee regarding the issuing of bonds and notes for the city for capital projects in the amount of $8,105,000. So, do we need to pass a motion to schedule that? We do. Okay.
I'll make that
Counselor
motion.
Lippman, would you like to make that motion then? Or Counselor Hamel?
I'll make that.
Counselor Hamel makes a motion, seconded by Counselor Lippman.
I have a question.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to schedule a meeting for after the council meeting on the 23rd, and the floor is now open for discussion, and Counselor Bear has a question.
In the breakdown of the amounts that are going to be brought up is the Riverwalk and the Wild Trails in the amount of $1.7 million. And I don't know if I missed it, but on December 23rd, 2013, we passed a resolution for that project totaling $1.5 million. So did we spend or put $200,000 more into that project last year that I've missed?
No, I think probably the component we did not clearly label, it also includes the Gateway project coming in off of the Main Street Bridge that was TIF funded. So it's the TIF projects, of which the two big ones were the WOW and the Riverwalk, but it also includes the Main Street Bridge.
Were they not all on this sheet that was, remember when they presented the projects, it totaled $1.5 million. It included Riverwalk, Beacon, Riverwalk, Landmark Segment, Riverwalk, Wild Trail Signage, Veteran Square, Waterline Extension, Main Street, but the TIF part of it,
So you're saying there was
I'm
a
saying
subsequent
that-
vote to
well-
add one more project?
I mean, the vote did come down to 1.5, and now it says 1.7. And I might have missed something that we added to it.
I didn't bring that list with me tonight. I know that was a working list, and I'm not sure if everything on that list got approved. Let us do the line item tally for you, and we'll compile that and get it out to the council tomorrow.
Yeah.
I do know the project across the street in the old Web building where the Laconia Area Land Trust came online, and we negotiated that easement and came in there, and we had discussion about including that at the same time. So let us give you the exact breakdown that tallies up that $1.7 million figure.
Okay.
So the inference is that there was another motion made subsequent to that $1.5 million vote.
I think at the point, we
could have
weren't
been,
sure where the
yeah.
Beacon West condos were. Now they're online, and what the owner may have been contributing versus the city. So I think there were a couple of stretches of the Riverwalk that were in flux at the
Did they
time.
come before us for approval?
Yeah, and we'll tally that and
I
and
mean,
give you
yeah,
the dates when they were done.
Okay.
I don't have the exact breakdown tonight. And if we're incorrect, we can always amend that figure amount and get the right one. If it's a higher figure, we would have to repost it. If it's a lower figure, since we're reducing the amount, we could always continue to hold the public hearing and just amend the number at that time if we needed to.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to schedule a meeting of the Finance Committee for March 23rd, 2015, immediately following the regular city council meeting. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. Vote is 6-0, that is adopted. Under Government Operations and Ordinances, I believe we have a request from Counselor Doyle to schedule a meeting on March 23rd, 2015, beginning at 6 p.m. to discuss item C, which is the proposed pawnbroker ordinance revision. That motion is made by Counselor Doyle, seconded by someone else on that committee? Who? Counselor Bounds. Any discussion of scheduling a meeting of the Government Operations and Ordinances Committee? All those in favor, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0. Meeting is scheduled. It's going to be a long night. Also, we have a request from Counselor Doyle to remove item A from the agenda for that committee. This item was sent to committee in 2011 and has not needed review, and that is the building construction, Chapter 119 of the city ordinances dealing with building construction regarding signed architectural plans for residential units. Counselor Doyle makes a motion then to remove item A from the agenda for Government Operations and Ordinances, seconded by Counselor Bounds.
Second.
Any discussion of removing this item from the agenda from that committee? All those in favor, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and that is adopted. Public Works. We have a request from Counselor Bolduc to remove item A from the agenda. This item was adopted at the council meeting on February 23rd. Item A being the Department of Public Works road cuts policy and manhole construction paving procedures. So we have a motion from Counselor Bolduc to remove that, which leaves the slate clean under Public
Yeah.
Works. You guys
Maybe
are
we
going to have to
should
think of something to do.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Bear. Any discussion of removing item A from the agenda for that committee, Public Works? All those in favor, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and that motion passes, and we have nothing for new for land and buildings. Don't believe, so that does our housekeeping for the night on the committee front. Liaison reports. Or any counselors have any liaison reports? See, if I forget this, you'll have one, but if I remember it, then nobody
Well,
has one.
actually, I can say, went over to the fire department today. They're pouring the footings for the foundation. That's continuing tomorrow. The walls will be going, some of the walls going up tomorrow for the, above the footings. And then they will be building the stairway tower right after that. So,
Really?
yep.
Okay, you had a meeting Friday, right, of your
Had a
committee?
meeting Friday, we paid some bills.
I think that's what the minutes are going to reflect.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on to the city manager's report. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have two reports in your packet this evening, one being the monthly economic development report. And we actually delayed this from being in the last meeting of the month, which it should have been in January, and we've made a decision to move it to the first meeting of the month, mostly because we were having a challenge getting state unemployment figures. Even now, moving it to where we are on, March 9th tonight, we're still unable to get January unemployment figures, so we'll continue to update those when they become available. If you turn the report over, we have the CPIU, which is one of the components of our tax cap calculation. We've started a new calendar year with January, and so it's 1 out of 12 months reported now, and the first number of the year was a negative 0.1%, mostly, I believe, attributed to gasoline and oil and those types of fuels dropping significantly. although this past month, we've seen quite a turnaround in gas prices, so who knows what February will bring at this point. And also, there's 2 items dealing with use of social media, dealing with LinkedIn, mobile, and search engines and that type of stuff that are being sponsored jointly by Belknap EDC, the Lakes Region Chamber, Belknap Independent Business Association, and the Franklin Business and Development Corporation. So if folks want to find out more about those, they can go to the lakesregionchamber.org website. We continue on now with the financial and operational trends. The top item on this page is our net gain in new construction value, which would be the second component of our tax cap calculation. We do follow the state year for assessing, which runs April 1st to March 31st, and the new value minus demolition is the component of the tax cap as allowed by that item in our charter. We're currently at $29.2 million for this current year. We have one more month of reporting to do. What we'll actually do is do an abbreviated report through the middle of March, and we'll go with the number there when I present the budget to you 2 weeks from tonight, being March 23rd. For comparison, a year ago at this time, we were at $14.5 million. We actually did have a sizable construction project pull their permits last March, and if you recall, that bumped up our final number that we used last year to $19 million. So we still are running significantly ahead of last year's pace. If you turn over to the back of the first page, or page 2, the 2 boxes closest to the bottom deal with the property tax collection, and we are on par with prior years as far as percentage collected to date during comparable periods going back to 2010. Our motor vehicle registrations continue to be strong. We're running at a little over 70% collected off of our estimates, and we are right now 2/3 of the way through the year. So if we were on an even keel, we'd be just under 67% collected, and we're a little over 70%. We'll turn your attention to page 4. We have the balances that we update every month for non-capital reserve. Those are for smaller capital projects that may have not been included in the budget. We're at about $150,000 there. The accrued leave reserve account ties in with what Scott McIntyre was speaking to tonight during our audit update of our other post-employment benefits. This isn't necessarily a post-employment benefit, but this is for time, or this account is funded to pay accrued leave time that our employees have in the books, whether it's through sick or vacation or personal days. If contractually they're entitled to them. In some cases, there's long-term employees who leave with some sizable amounts. The council has been great about moving some money into this reserve account. The winter maintenance reserve account, again, is there to help offset some of the spikes in mild winter seasons and more severe winter seasons. I think I would point to this one being one of the more severe ones, and this weekend isn't looking that great. I'm hoping for a little bit of a warm-up. We're on the cusp of some winter weather this weekend right now, so there's a little under $100,000 in the winter maintenance reserve. As we always try to do across all departments, we try to find existing funds in order to offset any overages we have, and we will look to do that here before we would make a request to the council to pull funds out of the reserve account. The health insurance stabilization, again, for the same types of purposes, currently a balance of a little over $170,000. Motorcycle week account sitting with $110,000, and the fire stabilization account, which was begun, I believe, last year in June, has $70,000 sitting in there. We have the impact fees just above that, so you can see when Bill was adopted several years ago, any projects that were already in the pipeline were grandfathered, so this was basically new projects going forward, have impact fees for the impact their development has on the community. These funds, in a general way of looking at it, have to go to capital type of items to increase capacity or support capacity or maintain capital items that we have across the categories of school, police, fire, parks, roads, and library.
I'm just wondering, Scott, are we at the point where we should look at some of those distributions, or is the timeline where they'd have to be returned to the people who gave them coming to that point? I mean, this has a clause in it that says if it's not expended within a certain amount of time, it has to be returned.
You're correct, and
So are we to that point where...
I think it's either 5 or 6 years, where when this was adopted in 2009 or 2010, and again, there was a delay in projects getting in. I believe the first money didn't even hit until late 2011, or it might have been 2012. We do track them by when they hit, and you're absolutely correct. If they are not used for that purpose, in essence, they expire and they have to be returned to the developer. So we are tracking those. When you look at the amounts, they are relatively insignificant at this point individually. Collectively, there's $47,000 there. But when you look at it, the, $19,000 is the highest amount in roads, and it drops down to $13,000, $6,000, $5,000. I think at this point, knowing that we've still, and I'll double check the dates for you, I still think we've got a minimum of 2 years. My recommendation at this point is to just allow them to accumulate, but very good point, and we are tracking them individually so we don't let these funds lapse.
Okay.
Scott, under the accrued leave reserve account, which is quite good at the moment, do we set aside a set amount every year, or do you change the amount in the budget?
We haven't funded this per se as a budget line item, like maybe if you were saving for a capital item and you knew you needed $500,000, you might budget $100,000 a year over 5 years to get there.
But you don't do it automatically?
We don't budget automatically, but we've kind of taken a look at the year end, and I'm thinking last year we had a premium holiday that had come for our workers' compensation program. It was kind of found money. We had budgeted it. We found out we got the premium holiday late in the game after the budget was adopted. So rather than let that amount lapse into fund balance, we made Donna and I and staff looked at it and said, what would be a good one-time use? And we made a recommendation to fund a reserve account or a stabilization account. So we're not actively funding it.
Okay.
Last I looked at, I don't have the current number off the top of my head for our total liability.
Was around
It's in the 700,000 range, give or take. I know we've had a few significant retires occur within the city this year, so 700,000 could be plus or minus 100,000. We can get you the exact number, but to have $330,000 sitting there, and again, knowing that the likelihood of all of these hitting in 1 year is next to none. So we're in a solid place, but again, as we can continue to feed that and take that liability off our books or fund that future liability, that certainly is a sound business practice to be doing.
Thank you.
And then on the last page, we have the winter maintenance, and to date, I think we're about, the total budget is $406,000, and you can see in round numbers, we're $36,000 over across overtime, winter maintenance, and outside contracts. So, we're in the 10% give or take range, and that does not include a couple of the small storms, which I know we were out sanding and doing some work on early in this month. So the number continues to bump up a little bit, and we will monitor where we can identify some savings within the Public Works budget and make a recommendation to you whether or not we might need to move anything out of the winter maintenance.
Counselor Littman has a question.
Are we still budgeting on the 5-year average for?
We have been looking, and again, we had that anomaly year 3 years ago when we started this, and the budget I'm working on right now, I think I've bumped it up in the area of, I think I've bumped up overtime, these three categories, the overtime, the winter maintenance, and the outside contracts, in the area about 5% encompassing the rolling 5-year period. So yes, we are looking to make some adjustments to the budget this year.
Any questions for the manager? Counselor Hamel.
Yes, Scott, under the overtime by department.
Yes.
Lines, under the fire for sick and hurt coverage for the month of February, there was some huge increases there, both in fire and ambulance service. Could you get back to us and let us know what happened there?
I will. I don't know.
We're told by the chief just a while back where those incidences were way down, and I'm just kind of curious.
Yep. Let me track to see what happened in February. I may not be able to share all the details that are related to it in an injury analysis, but I can give you the sense of what happened there. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the manager?
One other item, if I can, Mr. Mayor, that was not in my report, actually two quick ones. Channel 26, we continue to evolve with. More slides are going up. There is nice smooth jazz or cool jazz background music on the channel.
Smooth jazz?
Well, it beat out rap and hip-hop. It was a close voting, but smooth jazz won out for now. We've also temporarily, we're working towards being able to rebroadcast our own meetings on Channel 26. We're probably a couple of weeks away from setting up to do that, so we do broadcast live now, including the planning board is going live. When they meet, we will be setting up a regularly scheduled rebroadcast, so for those who miss us. We have reached out to LRPA. I know they've only got a part-time person over there right now, so we're awaiting a call back, but we're reaching out in the hopes that in the interim, where we're not rebroadcasting our meetings on Channel 26, that we can get them the DVD of our meeting and they can do the rebroadcast on Channel 25. So we're awaiting an answer on that as a short-term kind of fix, and we'll look to get ours going on Channel 26. The last item I have for you tonight deals with a piece of legislation that's in the House right now. I know you were all copied on an email that I sent not only to you, but it was targeted towards the Laconia delegation, our representatives, on Friday. Followed up with another piece, a reminder to them today because a vote is happening Wednesday. But it's House Bill 547. It deals with what was originally the providing once again a property tax exemption only for telecommunication companies. This was on the books for years and years, and it kept on being extended temporarily, and it really, in the views of a lot of people, it was an unfair property tax elimination for telecommunication companies only, but not any other utility. So the electric company pays taxes on their poles and property in the public right-of-way. The natural gas companies do the same thing. This was a very limited exemption for telecommunication companies only. A couple of years ago, the legislature finally let the temporary exemption expire after a good 20 or 30 years. Since they let it expire, it keeps rearing its head to reinstate the exemption pretty much every legislative session. It's back this year. It went to House Ways and Means Committee. The New Hampshire Municipal Association has been strongly against this for years. This council, in adopting and supporting policies of the NHMA, has taken that same position, because if the telecommunication companies get the exemption, all that means is that property tax burden is passed on proportionally to all the other property tax payers in Laconia. It went to Ways and Means, and they offered up an amendment that, in my view, passed 14-7, and that's unfortunate because the amendment started tying in items into the federal tax code for depreciation and doing a 30-year straight-line depreciation of this asset to where its full value at year one down to no less than 20% valuation on year two. It ties to original cost. It does a whole lot of things that don't make any sense with assessment and local assessments in each community. It passed 14-7, which is a very strong vote out of committee, recommending to the full House as ought to pass. It is literally worth millions of dollars to communities across the state. The impact to Laconia is we had about $2.4 million worth of infrastructure with telecommunication companies here in Laconia. It's taxed at about $55,000, $57,000 for their poles and conduits. Quick back-of-the-envelope math says if I took into account depreciation and the number of our poles that are over 30 years old, which is 70% of the poles, that's the majority of them, we would lose somewhere over $30,000 in property taxes from Fairpoint, which would be spread over other taxpayers. The bigger issue, as I and others see it, and I'll steal a line from Attorney Dyer, I'm not smart enough, other people are smarter, and I use their wisdom. But these are same poles that Public Service in New Hampshire owns. So if all of a sudden we start doing this for one utility, what's to stop another utility from coming in and saying our poles should be treated the same way? What's to stop a natural gas company from saying, if you're doing it for conduits, why not my piping and infrastructure that's in the ground or my transmission line? So there's a number of things, but this is really about fairness. This is not a not-for-profit corporation. I've seen their quarterly and annual results, so maybe that's arguable, but it's a for-profit corporation, and they should be treated that way. Users of the system, if they have to pass along the expense, do that just like users do for cable companies, gas companies, electric companies. So I bring this to your attention. This is being voted on Wednesday. I don't know if the council wants to reaffirm a position or just file it under we've been given notice, or ask me to take any further action. It's out of committee, so there's not an opportunity to go down and address a committee, but the full House is taking this up on Wednesday.
Councilor Lippman?
I don't know if Council Ham wants to go first, but
Well, I was just going to say, I would like to see the council support the manager and maybe sending a letter out to our reps, which he already did.
I sent one on
stating that,
Saturday,
and maybe putting it in as the council goes with this also. I sent
Would
a
you like to
reply.
introduce a resolution quickly that we go on record as opposing House Bill 547?
Exactly.
strongly.
Yeah.
Strongly.
Yeah, because, I mean, if they get this tax exemption, I mean, like Scott said, that's all
Higher
in,
taxes
that's
for
all
all.
in the billing anyway, to begin with, and if they get the tax exemption, that's going to go to their bottom line. I doubt if the bills will go down at the House level, so.
So Counselor Hamel introduces a motion to put the council on record as being in strong opposition to the passage of House Bill 547.
Correct.
Seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Any further discussion?
I
Counselor Lippman?
just add that by doing what they're proposing to do, they put all the burden on people who own property as opposed to the way it's currently. All the people who use the utility are paying the tax, so now we're narrowing the base
Yeah.
and putting it on just people who own property, so.
I'm sure these bigger cities, that's even a bigger bite, too.
How'd this get out of committee? 14 to 7.
I
So
think
does
they
a lot
saw
of-
it as a compromise, and sometimes if they feel they're compromising,
At work.
they feel that's a good solution, and
What is it, was it a partisan vote?
it actually has not usually been a partisan issue, but this vote was straight party lines partisan. On the committee, yes, 14 to 7 was pretty much right along.
Huge.
There may have been, I'm sorry, there may have been 2 exceptions to that, but for the most part, it was right along party lines, yes.
Anybody from the city on that delegation?
We do not have anybody on Ways and Means, no.
To be fair, sometimes the lobbying of the issue is.
Blurs the issue.
Blurs
yeah.
the issue, and they don't fully appreciate it, and that's
Yeah.
why it's good that it goes from the committee to the full chamber and then across the way, so we have a number of shots at it.
Absolutely.
That's what happened
Right.
with the taxes on the supposedly mobile home things that we
Yeah,
had.
right.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the motion proposed by Counselor Hamel, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and that motion passes.
Thank you.
One question I would ask of the manager, back to the TV issue. Do we have now, or will we have in the future, the capacity to stream that programming?
We're looking into that as well, so you would be able to do it on demand from our website, and we're having discussions about how to best set that up right now. That may be a couple of months down the road, but we're having,
Okay, so right now, we're limited to MetroCast customers.
Correct.
In terms of
Yep.
being able to.
but we're working on that with IT staff, and that's on our to-do list.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're on to new business. We have 2 items under new business, the first of which is a new request for field access. And this request comes to us tonight from the Lakes Region Girls Softball Program to raise funds, if I'm reading this correctly, this coming Saturday, March 14th, from 8 a.m., they didn't wait till the last minute, did they? Maybe this idea just sprang up at the last minute. From 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and the application says they're going to use it for a snowball game fundraiser.
That's true.
Put them on
So
the
that
side
sounds
of the road so they
interesting.
clear the sidewalks.
So a motion would be in order to approve this request from Lakes Region Girls Softball.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Hamel, seconded by
Second.
Counselor Doyle. Any further discussion of this request? All those in favor of adoption, please raise a hand. 6-0, and that request has been approved. Okay, this next one's a little bit complicated, so if you'll bear with me, I think it's mostly just procedural in nature. This goes back to what was discussed earlier, and Counselor Bear had a request for, and that is having to do with the bond, the issuing of notes and bonds in the amount at present, in the amount of $8,105,000. And as I understand it, Mr. Myers, this could be changed, this amendment could be arranged, this total could be amended down the road if need be.
It could be reduced, so if we looked at that and for whatever reason, numbers need to be adjusted, we could reduce it and still tie it
We
into
don't
the
need to
same
debate
public
that
hearing.
tonight. We're-
Correct.
we're-
Right.
Can
If we were to-
can we approve it as a not to exceed?
I would just do it with
Yeah.
this, we couldn't exceed it anyway because, well, yeah, I think when we go to the final reading to it, we want the exact amount if we have it, or at least the Finance Committee, so. My recommendation, we leave it here for now, and we can always amend
Yep.
it later on if we need to.
Okay, so if you'll bear with me, we'll go through these motions. A resolution has been provided to you by Donna Woodman. A public hearing is required in accordance with Section 512 of the Laconia City Code and RSA 49C:24. In accordance with Council Rule 27B, any resolution appropriating funds will also require 2 readings. The next reading of the resolution will be on March 23rd, 2015, after the public hearing. So the first motion that we need to pass tonight is a motion according to Council Rule 28F1 to waive the reading of the entire resolution for the first reading and pass it by title only. So that motion would be in order, to pass a resolution relative to authorizing bonds and notes of the city for capital projects in the amount of $8,105,000. Moved by Counselor Bear?
Yeah.
Seconded by Counselor Lippman. Okay, on the table, we have a motion to waive the reading of the entire ordinance. Discussion? Counselor Lippman?
Just, if we could, for the public, just list the 4 items that are on there and the amounts.
Sure. The 4 items totaling the $8,105,000 are $1,200,000 for the Frank Bean Road Environmental Cleanup Project, $4.4 million for the Central Fire Station Renovation and Addition Project, $800,000 for Main Street Bridge improvements, and $1.705 million for downtown TIF district improvements. Any further discussion of waiving the reading of the entire ordinance? All those in favor of waiving the reading, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and that passes. Next motion that would be in order would be to move on the first reading of this resolution by title only, and waive the reading of the entire resolution. So this is a motion. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry, we've already done that. Excuse me. The motion that would now be in order would be to move the first reading of the resolution relative to authorizing bonds and notes for the city for capital projects in the amount of $8,105,000. Moved by Councilor Bounds, seconded by Councilor, who did? I'm sorry, Councilor Hamel. I'm sorry. Okay, we got that, first and second. Any further discussion of passing this motion on first reading? All those in favor, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and that is adopted. Lastly, we need to move to schedule a public hearing. So a motion would be in order to schedule a public hearing on March 23rd, 2015, during the regular city council meeting regarding a proposed resolution relative to authorizing bonds and notes of the city of Laconia for capital projects in the total amount of $8,105,000. Moved by Councilor Bolduc, seconded by Councilor Lippman. Any discussion of scheduling a public hearing on this issue for March 23rd during our regular meeting? All those in favor, please raise a hand. That motion is adopted, and the hearing is scheduled. Thank you for your patience in getting through those procedural issues. We're on now to unfinished business, and we have 3 items there, and the first one of which is to continue our discussion and take any action desired relative to 21 Elm Street. So where we left this, we were in the midst of a discussion about whether or not there was any sentiment on the council. Sentiment had been expressed by Councilor Bolduc and others that we not subdivide the property, with the exception possibly of the park at the foot of the property adjacent to Elm Street, the small pocket park there. But not further subdivide it. And so we were in the midst of, I was asking if there was anyone who wanted to advocate for subdividing that lot at this point in time. Councilor Bounds had indicated he might be.
I want an answer from the state, up or down, as to whether we can put another entranceway over into that lot.
Whether we could what?
Put an entranceway into that lot.
From where?
From the street, from...
From Elm Street?
No. not
From the,
Elm
from the
Street,
parking lot at the...
Railroad Avenue. Yeah. From,
Counselor Littman.
I guess, to me, the whole aspect is potentially moot if Attorney Dyer is correct or not with respect to the lease situation. If he's correct, it's one path. If he's not correct, it's another path. And I guess, we shouldn't, I think, take a action on it till we get our independent view of that, would be my recommendation. I don't like to delay it, but, it makes it a lot easier if it's one versus the other at this point.
So,
So if...
be more specific
So
on what
if
you're talking about.
council...
You're not talking about subdividing now.
Correct. I'm saying I think the whole issue is moot if we're not even going to be in the position of potentially selling it, if we have the option of just leasing it directly as an extension, as...
Well, we could still subdivide it to lease it, correct?
we still got to negotiate that, the land.
I understand, but if we can't do what Attorney Dyer talked about, okay, if we're precluded based on fair dealing kind of situation, then I think we're on one path. And if we're on a path that we can, extend the lease technically, then it seems to me you do that and then you move on and figure out what else you want to do. But it seems to me that it's, I'm one for trying to move the ball as quickly as possible here, but it's not clear to me what latitude we have or don't have at this moment.
I agree with that part, but, I'm sorry.
Counselor Hamel?
I think to move this along, I would like to suggest to the council that we give the city manager the authority to investigate the lease proposition and also come back with a working model for us on how this can happen. I mean, we can sit here all day long and talk about, are we going to lease it, aren't we going to lease it, are we going to sell it, not sell it. I think what we need is legal opinion from our attorney, and I think we should give the city manager that latitude to go out and seek that advice and come back to us with either one solution or two. And then, I think, then we can decide and then make recommendations on top of that, which I'm sure would be allowed to do. But, to me, we're going to sit here and talk about this all night and maybe not come up with a solution. And I think in order to get the legal part of it, I think it should go to the city manager and let him talk to our legal authorities and come back to us with one or two solutions to this, instead of 6 different ones.
Counselor Doyle?
Could I also add that we get an independent appraisal both for
I
the
agree.
sales value and the lease value with that full lot and the lease value if it is subdivided, and what each section of that would be valued at?
I agree.
In the event that we decide to subdivide to make the fire station more valuable in the event
So
we
you'd
decide
like
to
an
use it.
appraisal done before we discuss it again?
I think we need to find out what it's really worth.
How long would that take, Mr. Myers? Do you have any idea?
I would assume a couple of weeks. We certainly could look to find somebody who could expedite it for the process, knowing that the clock is ticking on a number of fronts here. So I would say, if I had to guess right now, in order to engage services, get someone there and get it done, 3 weeks is probably pushing it, probably a little longer than that, but I think 3 weeks would be the...
Possibly our first meeting in April? Possibly.
And I just really think we owe it to the public for that, to investigate all the dollar amounts involved.
Well, and I think something that I would like to point out, I have no objection to the direction this is going at all, but I think that one central question to all of this in the end is going to be not only sale or lease, which is resurfaced again tonight, but also whether the real central issue, if you will, is going, regardless of which of those two directions we go, and regardless of what's legal and not legal, or what advice we get from the attorney. To me, the pivotal decision in this is going to be whether or not we open this up to a competitive bidding process, or whether we simply negotiate with the current leaseholder.
That was what I was trying to get at, and saying, we need to know which of those two paths we
Well,
can take.
And that's not necessarily a
You're
legal
getting at-
answer
That's what I'm
either, I
getting at.
guess, is what I'm getting at.
that's what I'm trying to allow the city manager to do, find out which path we can go down
Well, I'd like,
and not cause problems.
I'd like to hear directly, I mean, I think, get the manager to get that, but I'd like to hear directly what the attorney said, so I can compare what I'm
That's fine.
hearing here.
I have no problem with that.
So that sounds probably like a non-public meeting then, when we,
It'd be a non-meeting consultation with
Yeah,
legal
with the
counsel, yeah,
attorney.
non-meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
So we can start at 4 o'clock on the, on the 23rd.
We might as well just stay here.
We can always have a special any time, it doesn't have to be.
right.
That's true.
okay, do we have, it sounds like we have a consensus as far as the next step, except on one point, and I want to clarify that, and that is Counselor Doyle would like to proceed to assessments at this point in time. Do we have a consensus on that? Because
That
that's,
can be done, but it's separate from what,
Depending upon what our legal counsel tells us, depends upon how extensive I think the assessment.
so legal first.
Yeah.
I think the assessment
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm piping in now.
yeah.
You want the
I thought
assessment
we already
now?
got that.
We
Okay.
we
Didn't
need
we
it
get
either
that
way,
figure?
so,
Yeah.
What was that figure that we got?
That was the property tax assessment. We're talking here as a commercial appraisal.
Oh.
Two different, I mean, yes, the assessment is one valuation the city puts on it, but.
Well, we're talking about getting a
Council does
commercial
get a commercial
appraisal as to both its sale value and its lease value, correct? Whole or subdivided.
Is- Either way we go, I mean, that figure can be used, so,
Right.
Do we have a consensus on that?
absolutely.
Yes.
Do you need more than a consensus to proceed on that? Okay.
By tomorrow morning, right?
Tomorrow morning? Okay.
Any further discussion of this issue tonight?
I guess just Councilor Bear's suggestion is, do we need, based on all the other things we got in front of us, do we need a special meeting to accomplish this?
Let me check with the attorney and check availability and see how complex we think this might be, and let me get back with the mayor, and we can coordinate a special meeting if we need to.
Of course,
Sounds like it's going to be a month.
no, but it is a sort of a separate situation. The assessment can be going on, but the settling the situation of lease versus sale
Competitive
isn't
one.
going to be
That shouldn't be long.
harmed,
No, but I agree with Council Lippman.
Yeah.
I would like to arrange a meeting so we have legal
Oh, yes.
counsel in the room, so you are
Yeah.
able to ask follow-up questions and get
Yes.
everything answered in one, as opposed to some of this back and forth. So let me connect with legal counsel, and we can figure out how we can make that happen, and I'll coordinate that with the mayor.
Now, one thing I'd like to find out too, though, Attorney Dyer, are you going to come up with any other plans? Any other proposals?
He's always thinking.
You know, I'm slow. It takes, you know, when you get to a certain age, you know, it takes you time to generate these things. But as far as I know, but it's a dynamic, fluid set of circumstances, and it really depends on how things go, but I don't think so.
No barter arrangement or
No,
anything?
you know, typical lawyer reaction, you know, maybe
No
not,
question of him.
but I'll try not to.
Question,
Counselor Lippman has a question.
just a procedural or an input question. Obviously, Erwin Marine's here, Mr. Wright.
Right.
Mr. Wright is here as to whether, if they have something they want to express from council, that they share that with us, so our attorney has the full benefit of the thinking around it, so that when we're advised, we have a more complete picture. We don't have to have another meeting because we didn't have all the information to be considered. I don't know
Certainly.
if you want to do that or not, but that would be a benefit to move.
Their attorney was at our last meeting.
Right. I'm just saying that our council can only advise us on the issues that we raise. If there's other issues that we haven't thought about, makes sense to have it all in one fell swoop.
What's the real shame is it's at this point.
Well, it is, but
Yes,
You know, a 30-year neighbor,
yes.
and now this is happening, you know?
and a good neighbor.
May I just say that if you are going to accept written comments from council, that it would probably be appropriate for us to also
Yes.
submit our ideas in writing, so that you have, your attorney has our input as well.
I think that's a good idea.
Good.
I just don't want to keep on going because we don't
I
have the
understand.
complete.
I understand.
Got to come to a conclusion here.
I
At
understand.
some point.
That all makes perfect sense to me. Put it in writing.
Anything else on this issue?
Just wanted to give this a little finality, make a motion to table this to the next meeting, just so you've taken some action on this.
Counselor Littman moves table, Counselor Hamel seconds. Counselor Bolduc seconds. I'm sorry. Counselor
Yes, gotta get names.
Counselor Hamel wasn't
They look
looking.
alike.
Yeah, get over here.
I was looking at Counselor Hamel, but he wasn't looking at me. Counselor Bolduc seconds.
Perpetual hand will be up then.
Motion to table this and continue it under unfinished business at our next meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, and the motion is adopted, and the item is tabled to our next meeting. Item 2 under unfinished business is the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 235 zoning relative to alternative treatment centers, medical marijuana dispensaries. First motion that would be in order would be to move a reading of the entire ordinance.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Littman, seconded by Counselor Hamel.
Throw it right out the door, that's what I'd like to do.
Any motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion of waiving the reading of this entire ordinance? All those in favor of waiving the reading, please raise a hand. Motion is adopted, 6-0. Okay, the next motion to be in order would be to adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 235 zoning as presented. We have
So
a motion to adopt the ordinance. Moved by Counselor Hamel, seconded by Counselor Doyle. Any discussion of this ordinance before we move to a vote? All those in favor of the new ordinance, please raise a hand. Vote is 6-0, and the ordinance is adopted. Sign the original. Oh, I gotta find the original. And don't let me leave without signing the original. Okay, last order is budget summary review. You'll recall at our last meeting, city manager provided us with a what was called a 30,000-foot view of where we stand in executing the fiscal year 2014 budget, and a rough preview of issues we might be facing in the 2015 budget. And tonight is the night, the manager will be submitting his proposed budget at our next meeting on March 23rd. So we'll get the big book. So tonight is our last chance prior to that to provide input to the city manager of what should or should not be included in the fiscal year 2016 budget, or what issues should be given a closer look. So
Cancel
now,
all the snowstorms?
I'm sorry?
Cancel all the snowstorms?
Cancel. No snow will be allowed in the 2016. Counselor Hamel.
Yes, under the monies that we got back from insurances and I forget what else, it amounted to like $800,000,
Solid waste.
solid waste, and is that correct?
The Concord Co-op, yes.
Okay. And I believe that a portion of that money is going to go into capital for road improvements.
That'll be my recommendation to the
Yep.
council, yes.
And what would be the remainder of that?
Well, it's still, I don't want to get into an exact number because I'm still working, the budget is still a work in progress, but assuming that there's maybe a couple $100,000, $200,000 remaining that I would not be recommending to streets, it could go to fund a reserve account, it could go to fund the non-capital reserve, because every year, when you look at the budget, there's a lot of smaller dollar projects that if you rank what do we need and what would we like and what do we want, I mean, there's projects, that sometimes when you're dealing with limited dollars don't make the cut. So tennis courts, drainage issues at a beach, for erosion, versus drainage on roads, which is important if we're doing a comprehensive road and we want to address the drainage at the same time. So there are some smaller items like that if we put money into the non-capital reserve account. The council can have deliberations over some of those, and they may be in the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 range that could choose to fund, out of that and get them completed, as opposed to specifically budgeting for them and using, some of that contingency dollars for those would be a recommendation. I think I'd rather use them for those, as I refer to them, one and off type of projects, so non-recurring, non-operational type of thing, but that would be a recommendation I could bring forward.
Okay. Yeah, that I would like to see, and Armin and I have been talking, and I think funding for the Lakeport Tennis Court would be a great place for some of that money.
And that's actually...
I don't know if that's in your capital budget or not, but if it isn't, then, we could probably pick that up with that.
And that's a great point. So without getting too deep in the weeds, we're trying to work on a USTA tennis grant. Kevin and Amy over at our Parks and Rec are doing it. It's one of those items, if we put it for the full amount in the budget, then they say, well, you don't need it. So if we can fund part of it, and I know the Levitt Park Association last year had offered to contribute $10,000 toward that. So that actually is one of the items that we're checking with them to see if they're still willing to contribute $10,000. And I'm looking at maybe three-tier funding that, a portion out of the budget, a portion that we don't fund yet in hopes of getting a grant, and a portion from the Levitt Park House Association if they're willing to continue with the $10,000 they offered last year. So we're looking at that approach, but if not, it could be done out of the non-capital reserve account, absolutely, if it doesn't make the final.
That there's part of, the non-capital reserve fund is part of this year's budget.
I think it's slated in the budget for $78,000, or we could try to fund part of it within the budget, and if we didn't get a USTA, United States Tennis Association grant, maybe the remainder could come out of the non-capital reserve account. So those are some of the things we're trying to piece together and leverage some dollars.
Councilor Lippman.
A number of things have come up in terms of before us in the past year. One related to, land uses, and one of the things I'd like to see done in the budget is to get us in a position where we work through this stuff so developers have a sense of what's allowed and not allowed, that we fix all these issues of permitted uses in different areas. This just seems to be dragging along. I think the master plan process is going at a pace that's less than what it should be. Not to be critical, but of what's trying to be done. But I think, for this to be relevant to anybody actually, other than having a good plan, it's got to be done timely, and it's got to be put into productive use and on a more fast-track basis. That's something I'd like to see addressed in the budget with respect to planning. I don't know if other councilors feel similarly about
Enough money to speed up the process? Is that what you're saying?
Whatever it takes, not necessarily just, I'm not saying an open checkbook, but what does it take to get a plan in place and say, rather than having it take 5 years to get done, and by the time it's done, it's irrelevant. What do we need to get it done within
18 months.
18 months as an example?
Exactly.
That's one thing I'd like to have addressed in the budget process.
Okay.
Go ahead, Henry. I'm sorry to interrupt.
If you want to add something, go ahead.
Well, it doesn't, it isn't to do with that. If you want to continue, go ahead. I'm sorry.
From the police department standpoint, I see the chief in the back of the room. I'm interested more in what we've funded a partial position in terms of Officer Adams and his work. I'd like to understand what more productively could be done to help us address not just the enforcement side of the drug problem that we're seeing here. Our town had more deaths from heroin than Manchester last year, is my understanding of the statistics. And how many deaths have we had this year, Chief?
If my memory serves me correct, this year I believe we've had 3 suspected overdose deaths. Last year we had 10 suspected overdose deaths. That seems, Concord had, I believe, 13 or 14 deaths, so it would be hard for me to believe that a city the size of Manchester had less deaths than we did. I'd be very surprised. But Concord, I believe, had 13 or 14. I
I
was
think
at
they
a
had
forum.
24, I heard.
Manchester?
24, yeah.
That seems more online as far as, nonetheless, obviously, it's a
A lot full of
huge
folks.
issue for our community, for the whole country, and 10 is far too many. I'd argue that 1 is far too many.
That's right.
To be honest with you.
That's right.
And our goal has always been to have 0 overdose deaths, but
think my perspective is that people are competing, communities are competing to deal with the issue, and if we don't keep up the pace, we'll end up absorbing more than our fair share of the issues, and I'd like to.
So you're seeking as far as some continued solutions,
Right.
Initiatives. Obviously, the Eric Adams position is kind of a unique position. We've talked about that, and we're being seen as models of the state, and people are coming to us to try to copy that for their community. So more of that type of initiatives, is that what you're looking?
Yes, what would be innovative that we could try to do? And I look at this as trying to, we end up financing the cost of this problem directly and indirectly. And-
Absolutely.
And so, what else?
We could do that. I think with Eric's position, as it continues to morph into whatever it's going to become, we start going into different directions, starting new initiatives that, as he's spoken with this group and this group, that he's adopted. And I think we'll continue to do that, learn as we go. Obviously, it'll be fantastic, because, Eric is quickly becoming overburdened with all of his outreach, contacts, and things like that. It would be tremendous, yes, if he had some sort of assistant or something like that, and obviously, people internally are helping out with them, staff officers and things like that, but, we're working closely with corrections and trying to hit that aspect of it, and also some of the court initiatives that are occurring currently, where we're kind of opening discussions there as well, so.
Counselor
But
Hamel?
it-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Chief, is it possible, especially where you just mentioned you're working with corrections, I know budgets are tight everywhere, is it possible for the county to dedicate an officer to help our officer?
The county at the sheriff's department or corrections?
Sheriff's Department.
Which,
Probably Sheriff's Department. It's going to
I
benefit.
don't know, and I
Benefit the
mean,
county too,
absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
doesn't hurt to ask.
There's no boundaries as far as drug sales, drug use. Some of these other communities, I have not had the conversation with the sheriff, so I don't know what his staffing levels and commitment of his staff, what that exactly entails, but, we would definitely consider the
even
regional
if
approach
it's
to it.
part-time, quarter
Yeah.
time, to maybe start getting a little help, not just within our department, but, maybe a little more in
Yeah,
the
but with the
area.
methadone overdoses, I think we did something similar. I think maybe it was with the DEA at the time, but we partnered with an officer from the DEA to complete that initiative.
I hate to be a naysayer, but in the current times, I wouldn't be counting on
know
the
that.
county to help us in any way, and
Yeah,
figure
but
that-
I think the sheriff could make that decision. He's in charge of his men.
Sheriff might, and there might be some resourcing that you can do with the House of Corrections and the treatment facilities up
Exactly,
there.
which is what we're doing, but also at the county level for other municipalities, other departments, local departments. We do
Yeah.
discuss this at the local chiefs meeting. And obviously, each department, each community is different. We're experiencing the brunt of the heroin epidemic, but other communities, Belmont, Guilford, Meredith, are all having overdoses as well, and some of them overdose
It's all
deaths
over
as
the
well.
country.
So
Any of the
it is all
interns?
over the country.
Any interns from the colleges?
We have, I think, at least one intern now.
Couldn't
And we
they-
do have the interns work, but obviously, they're restricted to exactly what they can do. They're good for getting statistical information, maybe putting together some reports, things like that, but to do really the meat and potato work, I think you need to have somebody who's trained, whether an officer or a civilian. But no, understand what you're saying, trying to be proactive, trying to stay ahead of this and continue to think out, what I call
The other
outside the box.
The other side is doing the same, you know, the
Is-
people who are trying to perpetuate this on our, or perpetrate this on our community are thinking about creative ways of working around what we're doing, and
there's
not
no
just an
question.
enforcement issue, but just, you know, I think we have to keep on trying to be innovative to keep gaining ground, if you will.
Ahead of
No, I absolutely agree to that, and we'll certainly look into maybe some programs on a nationwide level that maybe we haven't focused on at this time, and
Well, maybe what we could ask you to do is look at the proposal you gave us last spring.
freshen it up.
Freshen it up and see if
Do
there's
that.
something
Is
in
that-
there that.
Would that be helpful, or?
That would be helpful, but I think, you know, looking at what else is going around the country of successful models of innovations would be,
Absolutely.
like to see us.
You know, this whole front is so frustrating on so many different levels, and
It is.
and I'm gonna be a little bit overly subtle here because I don't want to get into partisan politics at all at this level, but I saw a statement put out a week or so ago by one of our representatives in Washington about how they were supporting some anti-heroin legislation because this plague was affecting our whole country, and this person was signing on to this legislation and whatnot, and the office of that particular person couldn't answer the simplest question about that legislation. They clearly hadn't even read it. You know, I mean, it's just giving lip service to, we're trying to do something.
Right. I was involved in some of those
Yeah.
meetings that day.
I mean, it's just.
But you are doing something.
I think we are doing so,
Yes, you
absolutely.
are.
And Eric's position is something that I think that our community should be proud of. Obviously, the council supported that, but that's something that really didn't exist, that we've created, thinking completely outside of the normal law enforcement box, and it's making real difference. It's really helping people, but I understand it's frustrating because we continue to have overdoses, we continue to have deaths, and obviously, it's going to take time to really bring this to some sort of conclusion. And
Counselor Hamel.
I got one more question, Chief. Of what Eric is doing, along with partnering with the other nonprofits in the area for help, does he have any confidence that when a person contacts him
Yeah.
about their problem and is seeking assistance,
Yeah.
that he can bring him to an agency that will truly help him through the entire process of getting off the drug?
Well, he's definitely.
I mean, you're saying he's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So can he have conversation with this person and say, I know where I can bring you to be taken care of, and then that
And then
place
do it?
will do it?
Yes, he's doing that. He's provided rides, he's made phone calls, he's connected people with services that exist, given them information on how to obtain funding through that. He's overwhelmed because not only is he doing the outreach, but he's attending all of these meetings. All of the meetings that I go to, he goes to more meetings. So he's doing all of this, and it's a new position, so it's just a lot of things going on. Counselor? Go ahead.
I think what Councilor Hamill's getting at is there's different parts of treatment. There's sort of getting off it, and then there's the support that you need to
Exactly.
to stay
That's what
off
I'm
of
saying,
it.
from
And
the
that,
start.
that I think is lacking statewide, that there's.
It is.
And, you know, how we might be able to interface into, I'm aware of, just based on some of the work I do, there's a group that's trying to build out an infrastructure statewide and recovery support services, basically, once you've gone through, if you will, the medical and therapy components of getting off of it, how do you stay off of it with the kind of social and other supports?
Right.
And I don't know if there's a point of intervention that would complement that kind of
Sure.
activity, would be kind of just maybe a direction that
Yeah.
might be
Yep.
worth looking
That's what I'm
Good
getting
idea.
at, is if Eric could, update your procedures or whatever you're doing now, and see, if he can come back and say, we've talked to this organization, and this one. They'll go through the treatment program with this one. This organization is going to help them stay off it, keep track, and maybe there's another one that's going to find them a job, or whatever it takes to bring this person
Setting up a
back as a
timeline of services for.
Yeah, so they will become a useful citizen again.
Yeah.
And, through that process, and lessening the burden on Eric to follow through each step for that person. These other organizations should be able to do that for him.
Yeah, but
I'm sure he's going to keep in touch with how's he doing.
Right.
But,
Nope, we'll take that back, and I'll talk to him
there's
and
even
see
any.
exactly how he's,
Yeah.
right, of course.
We don't-
Services
I don't
are
know if there is
limited,
any or
so.
not, so.
But, I think the recovery services are what's the missing
Yes.
element here, and there are going to be some community initiatives that we may be able to leverage in that area. That would be worth
Absolutely.
pursuing.
I appreciate the comments.
The other one was related to the police department, was last year you gave us some information on surveillance kind of infrastructure to help monitor what's going on in the city in terms of if there's a plan, a second phase of that to be considered. I'd like to know what that is.
Right, so I've been in discussion with some of the councilors, the city manager. We just purchased, out of our existing budget, one of the cameras. I think it was approximate price of $4,500. That should be here shortly. And we just wanted to kind of take a look at it, see how it functions, see if it's really practical and what we were looking for. We have a verbal agreement with the company that they will refund us completely if it doesn't work out. So that step has been already completed. Like I said, we should have that camera, I think, maybe in a week or two. It's already been built. It's built specific to what standards we requested, and we should receive delivery of that. Then the decision will be made, where will the rest of the funding come into play for the other cameras, whether there's been talk about TIF district funding for some of them, and maybe we could find more funding for maybe in this budget for one of the cameras, and then put something in the budget for next year, or find a way to pay for the others. We're talking, I think at the time, 5 to 6 cameras, equivalent to about $20,000 to $25,000. That primarily will be used in the downtown area, obviously depending on where the funding comes from. If it's TIF money, it's going to have to stay in the TIF district. The camera that we just bought, we can put wherever we'd like. And then there was also talk about the cameras at the traffic lights, the intersections. We bought a card for, is it 1 or 2 of the intersections, I think, that have it. We have a meeting. It didn't work. We tried to download the information. We couldn't get it to download, and a representative from the company is coming on Thursday at 8 o'clock to meet to talk about that, and maybe potentially changing over some of the other traffic lights at other intersections, so that's where we're at with that.
Any other police budget issues?
I have no
Counselor
police.
Bounds?
I have no police, but I do have some.
I'm sorry?
I have no police-orientated questions.
Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, Counselor Bounds, what else?
Yeah. Just so I know, how long has this master plan been hanging around in terms of the status of it? Because I'm not sure what the timeline, isn't it supposed to be done in 2016? Isn't that the prediction?
I think the first 2 chapters, the land use and economic development, I would expect before then.
Well, okay. So that will be done this year?
I think towards the end of this year, yes.
Okay. And how long have we been working on the rewrite of this thing?
Well, it kicked off with some of the values-based and what's important, and that kicked off probably early last summer, middle of summer, into full gear to kind of get to a large community engagement, what's important, what should we be focusing on, and now from that, it's led into the land use chapter and the economic development
So
chapter.
we're really in the 18-month timeframe in terms of putting this thing together.
For those 2 chapters, yes. Other chapters will evolve
Okay.
as we go, but those 2 being important to the council, and planning staff knows that. I would expect by the end of this year, yes.
Because it's been my perception, and I'm not disagreeing with you.
It's okay if you do. You'll still be my friend.
It's been my perception that the folks at the planning department have been pretty focused about getting this work done, in a timely way.
They have been, and part of it is community engagement and making sure voices are heard, so you have a valid plan, and that takes time, and I understand that we want it to be at a quick enough pace so that it's relevant at the end of the day that we can do something with it. So sometimes those compete a little bit, but I think we are moving fairly aggressively for that without trying to bypass some of the community engagement part in the process. So we are hearing the sides, both sides.
I'd like to weigh in on something on this issue and involve you on this, since you're our liaison to the planning department. Here's a primary frustration of mine, and that is that at some point in time, at what point, and I think there is no point until the very end, do the elected representatives of the city get to provide their input?
In terms of planning decisions?
In other words, the city manager is talking about the outreach and due diligence in terms of getting community input, and clearly there's been a huge effort made in that effort. But there's been no attempt, and so far as I know, there is no attempt to solicit input from this council, which is the representatives of the electorate. Now, what's going to happen is, and I can tell you how the way these things work from history is, at the very end, it's going to come to us for approval, and we're going to be told, you have to approve this because of all the work that went into it on the part of all these volunteers, whether you agree with it or not.
Well,
And if we say no, then it's like we're slapping everyone in the face who spent untold thousands of hours developing it.
And I think last time we had to approve it because it had to be by the next day or some timeline, or?
Yeah,
Like that.
I'm not sure about that. but-
was. I think.
So I guess my question to the planning board in developing this, at
Well,
what point do you outreach to the city council for its input?
I'll bring that to the planning board's attention. And I think Ms. Saunders has done several mini presentations to the council about the status of the planning.
I'm not talking about status. I'm not talking about process. I'm talking about input.
Well, when she gives a presentation, you can ask questions, you know. But I'll certainly convey your concerns to the planning board and see what their response is. My response is, come to a planning board meeting, you'll have fun. Or give us questions, and they'll answer them, or all kinds of different solutions. If you would like me to do an update or get input from any of you, just tap me on the shoulder. I'll buy you a cup of coffee, and you can do it.
Councilor Bear.
I have two comments. The first one is, there have been outreaches to us, and I attended one and spent 1 hour with, they gave you an hour appointment.
I went to that one, too.
Yeah, and spent 1 hour with one of the fellows from the,
Point guys. I
Yeah.
call them the point guys.
and it was open to the public, and anybody could sign up, but I did receive a call from the planning board reminding me that it was there, and if I would like to attend to give my input, I could, and I made an appointment.
As
on
a
it.
citizen.
No, I went as a city councilor. But you're both, actually, But anyways, I spent 1 hour, giving my side. The other comment I had was, when we talk about the length of time it does to do a master plan, this is the last master plan that was done, and there's pages and pages of probably the same situations, the same proposals that are on there now. And it's divided into what was the action we were looking for, then it says who's responsible for taking care of it, then the other one is the status. Was it completed? Half the time, there's been no action. To me, it simplifies the process this time, because you've got something in front of you to go by. You merely look it over and see if any of these things correspond or represent something you're trying to do today. If they haven't been accomplished, they need to be, they should be packed, put back in. It just seems to me that, 5 years is just, an awful lot of time.
Counselor Levin?
I just, again, it's not finding fault with anything that's
understand.
being done, but I just think that in terms of, as a useful tool to do business with the city, we're not there. And I want a plan this time that is useful to shaping development in our community. And I understand that there's a piece of input, but it seems like it's moving in a sequential kind of way of moving it, as opposed to a number of parallel paths that come together to a point. And I think the point the mayor raises about, there being constructive dialogue and feedback before it gets shaped too far, because we're the ones hearing the issues from our constituents about how frustrating it is to work in the city. And, some of the reason we're here is to try to make it better. And I think, teasing that stuff out is part of what we're elected to do and to work on. And I think that piece, I feel like, I just want it to move faster, and I want it to move, I don't know how to describe it any differently, but I think it's just looking for it to come together in a more productive fashion. And if that requires supporting it with some outside expertise to pull certain pieces together, that's, from a budget standpoint, that's why we're having this discussion as to what are we looking for in the budget that's different than you might be the status kind of quo rolled forward.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes. One of the things we've brought up for several years, going back maybe 3 or 4 years, is one-stop permitting for the contractors that come into town, or business or whatever. And I'm just curious where we are on that. Are we there? Are we in the process of getting there? Or
We are close. We're working toward implementing Code.
Code and,
Yeah, but what's the name of the software, do you know?
CodePal?
CodePal as an operations software. So it's used in some sections of the city right now, but not here in City Hall. So we're coordinating. We've brought together meetings with all departments. We've had demonstrations of some different software to look at. We've settled on this one. We've just run some fiber between the fire station and here, so that when different units go in different places, they can download and I'll have the updated data. We're going to be able to handle credit cards in the field, which is something we've rolled out recently at the transfer station and at Parks and Rec and other places, so that if someone's on site and they want to be able to pay an entire bill, they can. It'll be able to tally components, so you don't have to go to Public Works and pay one thing in water or another thing in here. You can sign electronically when the systems are updated, all of the lock signatures, and you've got to have, PIN numbers or whatever to do it, but there's protection with authorizing signatures. All that is in the works. There'll be handheld units that'll be able to go to the field and have instant updates, and anybody in the field could be able to look at an existing building permit for a project, for instance, and say, oh, these 3 people have signed off on it, we're waiting for this department or that department right now. So we've demoed, we like it, we know where we're going, the fiber's run, it's a matter of doing the final okay and bringing it in. So my expectation is we'll continue on that path in parallel with the construction at the fire station going on, the fiber there. New server is due for the fire station imminently. For software, we've just, as you know, have done the upgrades to the servers here, so we've got the platform to put it on. It's in the works, and we figure, so it won't necessarily be, they can do all their business in one building, but we'll be much more flexible in the field with where things go and the timeliness of signatures and stuff occurring, because a lot of that would be able to happen electronically.
so the person would still have to go to multiple buildings to
Yes and
start
no.
the permitting
We're
process?
looking now where they can submit stuff and we can create it into a file and upload it to these things, so they don't have to go around and drop off hard copies everywhere.
Yep.
And the same thing, if it's much easier for a contractor to be able to write one check or swipe one credit card, we can compile those bills, compositely by departments, as opposed to having to say, now you need to go to water and get the sign off and pay your bill there. Now you need to go to Public Works for this here. So we're adding that technology of compiling it And there's even a portal, we're not sure if we'll get there or not, but there's even a login portal that someone would have that they could log in to look at their status of their particular, that we would give them a building permit number or however the file number was created. They could go online and create a password and do whatever and only access theirs. It's an option. We're not sure if we're going there yet, so there's a couple things in the works.
So, let me, if I get your drift, so could that person come here to City Hall and show his plans or whatever, and they would say, okay, you gotta go, you need something from Public Works, you need something from the fire department. Would they be able to initiate that paperwork from here, and then we send it to those places for acceptance and approval, and then it comes back, so he can come back here and...
Yep. The hope is that they will be submitted electronically, so we're not dealing with the paper, because otherwise, if we get a paper plan, we've got to scan it in and do whatever, and that's a lot of staff work. If we put together the format where we're willing to accept it, and a lot of communities do this, it's submitted electronically to us, goes into our one initiation point, then it gets disseminated to the partners, the departments that need to have it. Based on the initial look at the plan, we know you're going to need these 5 basic steps. It may not be everything that you need by the end of the project, but we at least know you're going to have these 5 things. We could, we could create an initial bill, someone could sign off and pay in those 5 things in a one-stop location. There may be some other bills that pop in depending on the complexity of what they do. Is their sprinkler system? Is their fire alarm system? Is there what, on and on and on. But we can at least have the baseline one, so by entering something in, we know these are going to be at least the base minimum charges, and create the file and start the invoice there, and they would be able to pay it in one spot. And from an accounting basis, those funds would be credited to the various departments, so water would still get theirs, sewer would get theirs, and do it that way.
So time-wise, where are we on that? Is it within a year, or?
No, I'm hopeful for less than a year. We've demoed it, we liked it, the fiber's run, fire is using it right now, and we've demoed it with Public Works, water, planning, code, and everyone has kicked the tires and probed the questions and gotten the answers, and it's just a matter of now getting it ordered and bringing it online.
Great, because that was one of the biggest things that council is here about. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is the SAFER grant. I went over your proposal on that. That's going to be in your budget.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there's 2 items there that will disappear over a couple years. One is the monies that are returned from the fire department is not dependable from year to year to use as a portion of that funding. And the other part is what we have in the cumulative line item for the, I don't know what we called it.
Fire stabilization.
Fire stabilization.
account.
Yeah, stabilization account. There's basically 2 years in that. After that, the other half of that funding, and the hospital is included in one portion of that, and I don't know if we're actually set on that portion. So, having two of the 3 pieces that aren't stable or would go away, then the other half of that, or 2/3 of that, would fall on the taxpayers at this time. So,
I think they're more stable than you give them credit for, and actually in the first year, we're not talking about using anything out of the stabilization account. We're actually talking about adding more money to it and not pulling anything out of it in year 1, because the approach was to use the 5 weeks of funding that are already in this year's budget that are kind of one-time funds to capture those and carry them forward. And we also know that by having the SAFER grant be extended to use the remaining funds in that grant is going to get us through from July 1 until basically October 1st. So if anything, those are the 2 one-time funds that are going away, and we're using those in year 1. In a general sense, in speaking about the hospital, they've been a very good partner with us in providing money for overtime. When you look at the amount of overtime that the city spent in the fire department a couple of years ago to where we are today, it's a couple $100,000 less in overtime across all departments in the fire, and that reflects it in the report that we just released, the 2014 Chapter 75 report. You look at fire overtime in that budget for that calendar year, 2014, it's about $350,000, $375,000. I don't have the number in front of me, ballpark right there for fire. If you go back to 2012, W-2 wage overtime was around $580,000, and 2013 was around $530,000. So when you look at the difference, a big portion of the overtime savings did come because we hired the SAFER grant, and we staffed to 9. So you ask, why does that make the difference? And the difference is that in the past, the hospital was willing to fund an extra paramedic on the daytime hours, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week. That brought us up by the hospital hiring that extra position, which allowed us to run an extra ambulance or have an extra ambulance available within the city. That allowed us to be more efficient in what we do, and the hospital saw the benefit in that. When we went and we hired 9 and we had the 9th person on, the amount that we billed the hospital for that overtime to have that daytime Monday through Saturday position went away. The hospital was willing to pay for it in overtime, and in essence, we eliminated a good portion of that need because we staffed it to 9. I'm not trying to put words in the hospital. I think the hospital saw that and still was willing to commit similar amount of dollars and said, okay, you've made an investment in your community. You don't need them in the overtime line item anymore. We'll help you in trying to maintain that staffing level at 9, which kind of gets the hospital to the same point they wanted to be in the first place. So they've kind of reallocated the dollars. But we truly across, and we talk W-2, it doesn't matter if it was motorcycle week on one of the 4 dedicated paramedics that the hospital pays for, whether it was additional training time, recall, whether it was fire overtime, whether it was, when the year we had the training for all of our emergency medical crew had to go from EMT basic to a new improved level of EMT advanced. That was all medical related. The hospital stepped up and paid that. So I'm not privy to the hospital numbers, but I do know what our wage numbers are, and from 2012 calendar year, 2014 calendar year, there's about a $200,000 reduction in W-2 wage overtime. And if you look at the time frame when that SAFER grant started, it came on in May of 2013. Now, granted, those new hires were not immediately able to run on their own in that first month or two, but as we ramped them up, you saw 2013 be a reduction from 2012 levels, and you saw a significant difference in 2014. So while it doesn't all show up in the general fund, it does show up in that wage report, and it's a significant number, $200,000.
The amount for 2012 overtime was $586.
Yep.
And it did go down substantially. And then 2013 was $548.
Okay, so that was
So
that was
one
half,
was-
so that was halfway through the year we started with the SAFER grant.
So 12 was about 70% of the budget of the overtime. And
70% of
total overtime.
Was in the fire department, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then 13 was 547, which is 60%, and now at 14, it's 51%. They were down to
So what was the number for 14?
357.
So it's pretty much the numbers that I just
Yep.
mentioned.
But
So if you ask what has changed, it's been the SAFER grant. We've added an extra person per shift.
The totals that the hospital paid for 12, 13, and 14, there's hardly any difference.
But I think you're just looking at what was tied to paramedic or ambulance. There's a lot more that goes into training, and all the paramedic training might have showed up as a vacation day or a personal day that someone needed for training. It had to go somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's what this is, sick
Okay.
time, personal time, vacation, extra coverage, holiday, and,
But I can tell you the hospital spends more than $200,000 a year in fire overtime, so I don't know what report you're looking at, but we've got several classifications. Some of it shows up in motorcycle week, some of it shows up in the fire operation, some of it shows up in the paramedic. For the 4 paramedics, they cover soup to nuts. A lot of it shows up in extra training, and it has particularly showed up a year and a half ago.
So
when we
what's the
had-
total number ballpark?
For fire overtime, I would have to
No,
tell.
for what the hospital reimburses us.
Collectively, when we include ambulance and the 4 full paramedics and benefits and retirement system and the whole ball of wax, I think it's in the, and I'm going to be in a hand grenade range, $700,000 range.
So
And that,
that's,
and that may be if they replace an ambulance on top of that every third year, you throw another,
And we collect some,
and they collect some revenue to offset it.
okay, but just limiting it to personnel,
But the
$700,000.
700,000 isn't all overtime. 7,000 is maybe an ambulance, all the cost of operating the ambulance, the 4 straight-time bunker gear for those 4 firefighters, retirement system, health insurance, there's a lot of components. But it all doesn't show up just in the general fund, because when you
So
look
that
at
number is only about 25% of the total.
of the total value of what the hospital brings to the city. And
Is thi-
Council
this-
Lippman's right, they collect the revenue off of the ambulance transport.
This just says ambulance costs covered by LRGH.
So that's just the ambulance, though?
Yeah.
So it's just for those 4 people, and when those 4 people are on vacation, the hospital would pick up the overtime to cover that. Or if we had 2 ambulances that were maybe on a transport to Concord or to Dartmouth, and therefore we didn't have the coverage here, we could do a recall for 2 people to come in and cover the ambulance, and since they were medical-related calls, that component would be billed out to the hospital, versus if we had a 3-alarm fire, that would be charged, and we called in off-duty crew, that would be fire overtime.
Okay, so I guess my question is, according to, I'm talking ambulance cost.
Okay.
All right. For the 3 years is basically flat, the $210,000 to $16,000.
Okay.
So if we have a reduction in 14 of roughly $200,000
Mhm.
compared to 13, where's that money?
Those are fiscal year
You may not be apples to apples with fiscal, but ballpark, they should pan out if they're fiscal year 200 saying there. But
So
again,
I guess what I'm asking is, if there is that kind of a reduction, that money should be somewhere in the fire, I might be looking at this all wrong, fuzzy-eyed or whatever, but if there's even another 100 or 150,000, but this shows 200, but if there's 150 even, then that should fund the other 2 guys,
So-
along with what the
so
hospital
let-
is.
so let me do it this way, and I'm just gonna, and I haven't done the math. So if the hospital is willing to fund a floater position Monday through Saturday, which they've been doing, so we could have 9 on shift, and they did that Monday through Saturday, is my understanding, that's 11 hours a day times 6 days a week, 66 hours a week, times 52 weeks a year, that's 3,432 hours of overtime, just for that one extra person on a Monday through Saturday. Forget about any other overtime for anything else, that's just add a 9th person. If we took in $20 an hour as an average straight-time pay for a paramedic, and went to time and a half and said it's going to be $30 an hour, that's $102,000 in overtime just for that one person, that one extra person, it's not the same one person, just in there. So that's $100,000 in overtime that, for the most part, the hospital was able to avoid a good portion of that cost. That's overtime that's separate from motorcycle week, separate from recalls for ambulance, separate for any one of our 4 dedicated paramedics who are on vacation time, sick time, maybe hurt, personal day, recalls, training for the paramedic. The hospital probably spends $300,000 to $400,000 on overtime when you factor in the extra ambulance coverage we do on motorcycle week, all the paramedic training, the shift coverage, and that floater. They didn't need to fund that floater, so just on salary alone, not even retirement system or anything else, which they also pick up in that overtime piece, just in straight wages to fund one person 6 days a week at overtime to bring us to a staffing level of 9, which allows us to run 3 ambulances if needed, is $100,000 in wages. Forget about the retirement system, which is another 25%. So when you see the W-2 wages, that's money that got paid as overtime. It doesn't matter, so it's separate from the budget. That's money we paid as overtime. If it was in the motorcycle week account, it would show up there in the budget, but it's in the W-2. It is there.
Well,
So-
as I understand, to try to summarize, as I understand it, and please correct me, the case that's being made by the administration is that when all those numbers get added up, the hospital saved approximately $127,000 out of all these categories put together by not because of the extra firefighter, that they would have had to have paid another $127,000 by terms of the contract if we still were at 8 firefighters instead of 9. And so the city has gone back to LRGH in effect and said, okay, you guys saved $127,000 total in all categories. So then the question is, would you be willing to push that 127 back into the kitty, so to speak, to help pay for keeping these firefighters, what's the grant runs out. I'm not asking anybody to buy that, but that's my understanding of what the case
They
is.
didn't, because we staffed at 9, they didn't have to spend what netted to be 127. They saw the value and still wanted to be at 9, and they agreed to shift it over towards staffing to that
So
level.
because the federal government came through with the money, the hospital saved $127,000. So then the issue going forward is what happens from here once that grant runs out. But that's, so anyway, moving us along, have you got some direction that you want to,
No, we'll discuss it more in
terms of the budget?
time. So I just wanted to, I guess what I'm getting at is, say, that we find we cannot afford funding 4. But the feasibility of funding 2 for now, kind of like what we did with the police department. We did half an officer 1 year, funded it fully the next year, that kind of thing, taking a step approach to bringing the 4 on instead of all at once. Because that might be fine for the first year, but those 2 funds, they're not reliable to me. The one that we're hoping on money coming back from the fire station every year, and the other one is what we have in the fire department, fireman stabilization, because that was just a 2-shot thing. It's there. We don't know if we can put money back there. So at the end of 2 or 3 years, we're relying on money that possibly won't be there. So what I'm saying is, what's the feasibility, just to think about it, of putting 2 on now, because I think with the hospital funding and possibly some of the other stuff, that can get us through periods where it wouldn't be as big an impact. I know the way you figured it, too, is lessening the impact, too. But
So we can certainly discuss this in more detail, and the council can tell me if it's too late at night, but only funding 2 isn't going to meet the hospital's intent of having 1 extra person Monday through Saturday for the hours I've
well,
stated.
that 2 person, that's the 9th person, and they can be on at that shift.
No, because by contract, we have four platoons, and people are assigned to a platoon, and our work schedule is 12-hour shifts back-to-back, so they work 24 on and 48 off, 24 on and 72 off, and that's contractually bound. So we do not have the ability to take 2 new hires and put them on as a floater. I've discussed that. Contractually, we're not allowed to.
So it's 4 or nothing.
No, we can hire 2, and they would rotate through, and some days they would be on that Monday through Saturday daytime shift, would have 9 if that platoon was working. Half the time, we would have 9, and half the time we wouldn't. So if the hospital wanted to make sure they had 9 covered all the time, they're going to have to pick up the overtime every other day, 3 days one week, 4 days the other week, and that doesn't meet the intent of them having, so they're going to say, now we don't have 127 to fund your firefighters because we have to fund overtime a couple days a week, so the hospital needs to reallocate some money. You can hire 2 and may not meet the full needs of the hospital, and they may want to discuss how we allocate the funds that they're
So you're
willing to
saying
commit
you
to
could
us.
put them on a platoon, but they may not necessarily line up with those hours?
As the platoons rotate through, they always would, but if we have 4 platoons, eventually they all roll through. So that means 4 days, 1 week we'll have the coverage, and 3 days we won't, and the next week it'll be reversed 3 and 4. That's how our shifts run. So we would need to assign them. We can't just look at the schedule on Friday and say to them next week, okay, we need you Monday day, Tuesday night, and Thursday day. Those are your hours. They need to be on a schedule according to contractually what we're obligated for.
Hours are getting late here. Counselor Bear, did you
I'm all
have
set.
something to
Thank
add?
you, Scott.
Yeah, I have my dumb question of the week. I know you have the answer. On page 51 of the expenditure report, under the engineering department, we budget $33,000 for the year, and we've spent $165,514, so we're 501% spent. I know there's an explanation, but what is it?
Within Public Works, there's so many components of what they do. We make estimates with the budget of how much money is going to go to signs, how much to street repairs, how much to engineering, how much to solid waste, and depending where the needs pull somebody in the projects we have in the queue, they may spend more time doing something. So we like to track kind of within a department as to how much they're doing on those categories, but at the end, it all blends into one big Public Works budget, and they have to make it work within there.
Yeah, it just seems to be very underestimated.
And you know, the wage...
It all-
Right, but the wages are a component of that, too, and the wages are in a whole separate
They come in a
section in
different
health
pa-
insurance,
I
so...
knew there was an
Yeah.
answer.
There's a lot of subcategories, but at the end of the day, Public Works stays
I'm entitled
within
to
there,
dumb questions.
within there a lot.
Okay, any other input for the manager as far as the budget is concerned?
I guess, I know we're hours late, so I'm just going to say real briefly on the strategic goal of trying to make the gateways of the community addressed. I'd like to see us try to advance that ball in the budget beyond what we're planning in the bridge project.
Right.
And in the Public Works, I'd like to have some sense of the success or progress in terms of what we implemented last year and how that's affected the budget with respect to additional mechanic and trying to take equipment into a service program and how that connects to the, what's the fund call that we, I'm sorry, it's late.
ISF.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the
yes.
mechanic we funded half a year just got hired and came on...
don't have to explain
No, I'm
all
sorry,
those.
but it came on board in February, and you'll have an update. John Gardner's been working on our vehicle maintenance program, and you'll have an update in April on a comprehensive look at our vehicles
I
and how
just
we're
want to see how it
approaching it.
affects the next budget.
Absolutely, yep, that's coming
Thank
in April.
Okay, on to council comments. Any council comments?
I have one not unfortunately, but one that I know the hour's late, but I had a constituent that's petitioned me to petition the council with respect to what was the content of House Bill 371. This constituent says she's got 21 signatures of other Laconia residents, and basically it has to do with the Citizens United decision, and asks that the council take up a resolution in that regard. Why I bring it to you tonight is that I was advised that the House has already defeated this, and on the other hand, in terms of bringing forward a resolution for us to consider whether we want to do that at this point, I think whether you're for it or against it, at least deserves, since
So do you want to put it on a future agenda, or would that be too late?
Put it on a future agenda, because I think it's reasonable if someone wants to have the council consider a policy decision that we do so.
Well, why don't we give that to the clerk then, and she can put it on the next agenda?
Okay, thank you.
Any other council comments?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Moved to adjourn by Counselor Hamel, seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Any